22nd meeting to order, and I'd like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is the approval agenda. Do you believe that we have any corrections? Anything different than what we have
Motion to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Entertain a motion for approval of minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes from January 8th and January 15th. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. We will have our public participation. I would like to remind that the members of the Tolland Board of Ed welcome members to the public to share their thoughts and ideas at this time when appropriate to do so. Members of the board and the administration may respond to comments during points of information. However, consideration of those in attendance in an effort to proceed in a timely manner. Follow-up discussion may take place outside of the meeting setting. And I also would like to add in that comments need to be in a positive tone and that there's no crowd outbursts, applause, shouting, catcalls will be tolerated. First up.
This is my first town board related meeting, so I apologize if I'm not familiar with the format.
Your name, address, and
406 Buckcat.
Sorry, what was your name?
Melanie Gooden, 406 Buckcat. I'm actually asking about mastery learning, and I'm wondering about, I have a couple high school kids, and I'm wondering what is being done as far as looking at the results of how it's working. I wasn't familiar with the program, but I have spoken, and as I'm also speaking on behalf of my ex-husband who does live in town and is a 17-year high school teacher in a different district. I'm wondering if the school is really looking at those results, because I'm really stuck on the fact that it's 100%, or that there's no accountability for the formative. This is high school, so if it doesn't affect, I don't know how it works in the lower grades. If kids are given an opportunity, giving no accountability to any of these formative assessments, and there doesn't seem to be accountability at the end, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of road to mastery. So I'm not really sure how to, sorry, I'm a little bit scattered because I was writing notes as I was coming in. But other successful schools have used the formative accounts where it weighs in 10% of the mastery learning. So when the kids are given, when you ask a kid what do the assessments mean? A lot of times they just say those are the classes that don't count, or those are the grades that don't count. So they're really not being forced to learn their math, they're not really being forced to take these things into practice. And I just want to know what the Board of Education is doing to look at the results of 100% mastery, where only the summative assessments are counted.
thank you.
Thank you.
That's how many people I get.
I always forget, coming new to 12 Blueberry Hill. I just want to say I read through the minutes from the past meeting, and I want to make a comment regarding the remarks of the vote administrators. I want to say that I've heard and personally witnessed great things from our administrators. In fact, our administrators give 110% every day. They have taken on additional responsibilities and staff and funds have been cut over the years. And they care deeply about the students and staff. I listened to the administrators' concerns from the past workshop. They are concerned about this budget, and if this budget goes any lower, what is presented, it will have lasting effects on the students. Oh yeah, this been Special ed caseworker. How in the world is it okay to reduce a special ed case manager and then split one between schools? That is not quality service. Case managers are needed for students with a variety of social, emotional, or academic challenges. Who is responsible for them if a case manager is at another school? Are we becoming a stagnant district? I'm hoping this board would want to continue to move forward and make gains. Nothing in this proposed budget shows we're moving in that direction. There are no new investments that I can see. I am hoping this newly elected board will recognize this as a subpar budget that has been put forth. Take a chance, ask what a level budget may look like with no cuts to sports, teachers, or programs.
Anyone next?
This is my first time to one of these too.
No problem. Name and address to start off with.
Kathy Pagan, 19 Pine Hill Road. I'm going to read what I wrote because I kept it under 2 minutes. I would like to present a success story. My son, who has autism, was one of the most challenging kids in Birch Grove at that time. Today, he's a sophomore in THS who was recently transitioned out of special ed and is an honors student because of the amazing effort and dedication of his teams and paras. Now, that sounds easy to say, but any family of a special needs child will understand how huge that really is. Every parent, whether of a typical or atypical child, lives hoping for their child's success. But without the aids and the support, children will slip through the cracks. With one special ed teacher leaving and one being split between schools, I feel like we're moving backwards. I believe any more cuts will fundamentally be stealing hope from real individual people with hearts that are already heavy with their daily life. Families move here with the confidence their children can grow, but we know that with these cuts, it will effectually be a lie. The truth would be that you have subjugated the welfare of real lives to numbers on a paper. And if you're persuaded to reduce the quality of life for the increasing number of children in our school systems who rely on these teams, then I'd be afraid that you may be personally removed from the reality of what it takes for an atypical child to be that success story. Thank you.
Next. Anyone else?
I'll just go. Amy Duff, 127 Robin Circle. I understand the town has given a recommended budget for this year, but I ask you as a Board of Education to advocate for our kids. Behind every program and every line item is a child that's affected, either positively or negatively. And you have the control and you have the means to advocate for our kids, ask questions, talk to our educational experts, and find out what you really need for a quality education here in Tolland so that we can move forward and keep providing a nice education for our kids.
Thank you.
This has to be 54 Lane. I also am a little bit concerned, and something I was taught a long time ago is to ask why, how. And if you attended the budget workshop the other day and you asked why, how, we're going to lose 2 art teachers, you would come to find that we're not only going to lose 2 art teachers, we're going to take 2 of the teachers that have to do with industrial education or whatever it's called, and we're moving one of those over to help teach the arts or teach a class. So we're losing classes along the way no matter what. That's one concern. Losing sports, it's maybe the only thing that draws a kid to come to school. And if it's a freshman where they're nervous about attending a new school, And they're worried about, well, most of these people on the board and in this audience probably wouldn't want to put their freshman or their 8th grader on a bus with a senior in high school. Well, if it's a freshman entering high school and they want to play a sport that they played their whole life, it may be their only opportunity to play in high school, is to play that freshman sport. I would ask you to look at the mathematics behind the decision on the sports situation. You get a team like basketball, there's only 10 kids playing at one time between varsity and junior varsity. That freshman team adds 5 more spots for 41 kids right now. That freshman baseball team adds 9 more spots. That volleyball team adds 6 more spots. When you think about the number of kids playing at one time, it's not a lot. There's not a lot of minutes over the course. When you're talking about a special education, Kathy, I can't believe you said it that well. It was wonderfully spoken. One of those teachers touched probably 75, 80 lives in a day. That's probably 5% of our school population, close to 5% of our school population. We don't want less people touching our kids. We want more people touching our kids and impacting them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone's good? Making sure. Okay. Next order of business will be correspondence. I'm Tony.
Let me get comfortable here. So, since the last meeting, we got a few emails. We had an email concerning a mental health and addiction working group. Email questioning if staff additions between the 18-19 budget and the 19-20 budget. Email also thanks the board and chair for taking steps to increase transparency. An email expressing concern over the superintendent's proposed budget. Email expressing concern over the superintendent's proposed budget and asking for careful consideration of the cuts. Email discussing concern for the superintendent's proposed budget in light of the budget workshop. This email stressed the need to trust in our superintendent of schools. Email discussing the challenges with the Google form when it comes to multiple questions. Email included a list of the questions concerning the superintendent's proposed budget. An email concerning the question over teachers' pay. Email concerning tuition. Email concerning superintendent's proposed budget. Email concerning pathways being created. Email concerning the CBA for district programs. Email asking how many kids are on the teams reduced by the superintendent's proposed budget. Email concerning technology in the budget. An email concerning athletic stipends in the budget. Email concerning paras in the budget. Email concerning nurses' salaries. Email concerning Medicare and FICA costs. Email concerning open choice revenue. Email concerning travel and conference increases. Email concerning budget effects of reduced programs. Email discussing concerns with the superintendent's budget. This email was electronically signed by 30 people. Emails discussing the value of paraprofessionals in the district. Email concerning math books in the middle school and their lack of use. 26 emails supporting a modest and responsible increase in the budget. 3 emails requesting the board to support a budget that maintains services at their current level. 2 emails supporting a fully funded Board of Education budget. Email requesting increased funding for staff. Email discussing concern over the superintendent's proposed budget and requesting compassion and honesty in the budget process. Email questioning lines 325 and 118 of the superintendent's proposed budget. Email requesting the board to look at each and every line item to get the best value for our students. Email requesting an increase in the budget to keep freshman sports and current teachers. Email recognizing the effects of the superintendent's proposed budget and requesting increases to eliminate the cuts. Email asking for information on the USIF account. Email voicing concern over the superintendent's proposed budget and its effect on preparing students for college. Email also discusses the effect on mental health. Email imploring the Board of Education to remember the silent majority and the mandate to perform the fiscal due diligence that the budget deserves. Email suggesting that the board's focus should be identifying waste and applying those resources effectively. The email stresses that more is not always better and asks for a more detailed line item budget that is easier to read. Email asking the Board of Education to keep all of the citizens of Tolland in mind while looking for a more responsible budget. Email asking the board to increase the budget to keep teachers, programming, and supplies. Email requesting an increase to the superintendent's proposed budget. Email requesting that the Board of Education adopt the superintendent's proposed budget as is. Email expressing disapproval for the superintendent's proposed budget. Writer requests further investigation into line item increases. Email expressing desire to present the town council with a budget that maintains services and is best for our town's children. And email expressing concern for the cuts and effects to the NEASC accreditation.
Thank you, Tony.
Need some water?
Thank you to everybody who emailed us, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we are reading all of them. We may not have gotten back to everything, but we only have so much time. Okay, next order of business are points of information. I'd like to maybe start over here. You guys have any?
Well, can I say something real quick?
All right, I'll talk on this. Is that too loud? I know that not all of us, I know everybody said thank you for the emails, but as a new board member and as a member of the community for just 4 years now, I definitely appreciate the outpouring of interest in the budget, and I appreciate the emails. Not all of us always respond. I know Walt responds at ungodly hours. But keep those emails coming because it helps guide us and puts us on the path, because we are here to be the voices of all of Tolland community, and we can't do that unless we hear from all of Tolland community. So I implore you to keep pushing for what you would like us to advocate for, and I implore you to push your neighbors, your family and friends to keep communicating that to us so that we can do the job that you elected us to do. So thank you.
In regards to the emails, thanks guys. And
Answer the mic,
anybody-
please.
Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry.
Anybody that sent in emails, thank you. I've responded to about a third of them so far. I will get to you guys. I do ask anyone that sent in an email asking for a reasonable and responsible increase, if you have any ideas in terms of in the budget where things can move around, we're open to them. I know we're asking a lot of questions, we're fairly new, fairly early in the budget process, so there are a lot of questions. Yeah, I have a lot of the same questions and concerns that you sent via email, and I know Walt is working diligently on answering them. And then I did want to respond to the woman that asked about mastery learning. Where are you? Thanks for the courage to get up and speak. We are working on establishing a curriculum committee, and I think that's something that committee can take a look at, and we would love to have you be part of the process there too, so thank you.
Yeah, and for Master Learn, I would recommend that you set up an appointment so we can talk about it, so we can give you a really good picture of the 360 in the district. You have some interesting ideas, so I think it would be good to talk about. And if your husband wants to come, I think it would be fantastic. So if you know, at any time, let's sit and talk or coffee and go over like the whole thing. There is a Mastery Learning Plan online. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's under Superintendent, there's Mastery Learning. It has some resources, and then there's the district's plan. So you get a better sense, because you weren't sure in certain buildings how it's implemented. It kind of plays out how it's implemented in the district and the rationale for it. And then whether you look at that or not before the meeting, I'm happy to talk at any point in the process. So we'll reach out and try to set something up.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to read the letter from the 38 members of the community into the minutes. January 17th, 2020, Dear Tolland Board of Education members, we are writing as a group of concerned parents and voters. One of the biggest reasons residents have moved to Tolland is because of the excellent school system. Year after year, we have watched continued cuts to our schools, and the trend seems to continue. In the proposed budget, the following positions that are being discussed as potential cuts. A high school art teacher, fifth grade teacher, and a special ed case manager. There are also expected cuts to educational programs and freshman sports. We are sure the superintendent and administrators do their very best to continue to offer the best educational experience under extreme budget requests. Everyone that sits on this board needs to be honest with themselves and ask themselves, does the presented budget give every student an opportunity to be a well-rounded student as they head into the future? We hope your answer would be no. Yes, 2 art teachers are retiring, but this should not be the reason not to fill a position. Many students use the offerings of art electives to further their education with the future of working in the field of art, may it be in photography, graphic arts, drawing/painting, and many other careers. A loss of a 5th grade teacher could jeopardize teams, add to larger class sizes, and result in students falling further behind, and some that may end up with intervention because of this. The loss of a special education caseworker will add to the workload of the teacher. The special education case worker position is one that is particularly skilled in working with students with learning, mental, emotional, or physical disabilities. Their responsibilities include writing IEPs, testing, and attending PPT meetings. A loss of an additional case worker adds the load to the teachers, and the extra skilled attention these special students require will be jeopardized. Losing freshman sports is another big concern. Many young athletes use this opportunity as an outlet, an opportunity for a better school environment. Some of these kids may not make the JV team, and if they do not, they will lose interest in the sport. We are asking that you have a conversation on what it would look like to have a leveled service budget, not removing any staff or programs. Any further cuts to the school system could jeopardize the integrity of our education system. Tolland Public School District should have the support of the Board of Education with a fully funded budget without significant cuts. And again, that was signed by 38 residents of the town.
We'll move on to the student representative report from Fisher Thompson and Alexandria Costa.
All right, so we haven't actually had much going on, so we'll try and get through it quickly. January Jazz, which is a concert at the high school, happened on this past Tuesday, the 14th. It includes the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade jazz bands. 6th grade jazz band and 7th/8th grade jazz band, and the high school jazz band. The 6th grade jazz band did a piece, or a few pieces. They combined with the 7th and 8th grade jazz band. 7th and 8th grade jazz band did a few pieces. They combined with us at the high school. High school did some pieces. Basically just showing the district's jazz program as a whole. 2 days after that, on the 16th, this past Thursday, was the quarter 2 high school music department concert, which includes the women's chorus, chamber choir, and jazz band. And it was a whole lot of fun. Again, just basically showing off here. Look at us at the high school. We're awesome with our music department.
So we're heading into the final season at the high school, so semester 1 finals are on the 29th and 30th, which is next Wednesday and Thursday. And then on the 31st, we have new semester day, so the high school is not school. The other week, their peer mentors went around to like all the freshmen advisory and just explained like how to study for finals in good methods, which I heard from my younger brother who's a freshman, that it was definitely beneficial for him.
Another thing that's happening is we're starting planning, and we created subcommittees for Mental Health Week and getting that all together. And I know from communication, Dr. Willett is entirely behind us on it. He is basically he's hitting it head on with us, and as with most things, he is giving students the support that they need, and he has nothing but their best interests in mind.
When is that gonna be?
It's, I'm not sure if we have an exact date. It's, I believe, late April, early May. I want to say somewhere around there.
When you iron up the date?
Yeah, I will definitely let you know.
Okay.
That's some good leadership from you guys, thank you very much.
Yeah, and they came up with that as well.
Is this second annual, second time? Yes. We did one last year, so moving on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fisher. And next order of business, we're gonna jump to the superintendent's report, which we have first.
Right, so, welcome. We have Rebecca and we have Nick and Dave. Just turn to that page so that you have it. They're gonna do a presentation on FOIA, so role roles and responsibilities. And to their credit, they're going to do it in an hour, so it's like a speed dating version of this. We're piling a lot in a small span of time. Thank you for coming.
No, absolutely, we're glad to be here. It's near and dear to my heart. Tolland Chapter, one of my favorite legislators began here on your board, one of us for a change, so I always stay true to that, and I think so. Nick's gonna start us off with roles and responsibilities and talk more global scale. I'm not gonna bore you with a lot of freedom of information. I'm gonna hand these out so that you have them. And this is sort of the hitting the high points and the basics. We are always available, or you can call us, or if you have some time for us to come and do a workshop. When you don't have so many major items of business to do, we're always happy to do that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to apologize too, because the roles thing we could do for 2 or 3 hours. If it's participatory in
We have done 2 hours in the past, so.
Yeah, because the hour you get to hear us talk a lot rather than talking to each other, and I apologize for that. What I'm going to do is a very condensed version of what I like to do with boards. To start with, just to give us a frame of reference. We're just ready. Okay, so I'm going to start with a real simple question. I don't know where to stand. How many school board members does it take to screw in a light bulb? Serious question, believe it or not.
This was on
One makes one.
the seminar that we just went to.
Yes,
And it
but I
was
don't
something
remember
about,
the
you have to depend on the experts or something.
The answer is none. It's up to the board to say, let there be light. You're the policymaking board, you are the executive branch, the legislative branch of government in this case. Actually, you serve all 3 roles in different capacities. As you found out earlier tonight, when you had a student matter, that falls into the judicial branch, where you sometimes have to make decisions about either student conduct or termination, for example, employee matters, and you'd serve in a different capacity. But in your legislative role, you pass policies which govern the way the school district runs. It's the superintendent's job, working with staff, to decide would it be incandescent lighting, fluorescent lighting, et cetera, and to designate the appropriate staff person to do the job. I was working in a small district not too far from here a couple of years ago, and we were doing this workshop, and we had already done this, and at one point I noticed the superintendent was writing feverishly on a legal pad, and I finally, curiosity got me, said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm taking the minutes. And one of the board members actually stopped me and said, she's screwing in a light bulb, and she was, because you don't want your chief executive officer tagging up the minutes. Have you ever been in meetings where will somebody take the minutes? What's the usual reaction? I hide. I don't want to take minutes. Because when you take minutes, you're not engaged. You're not participating because you're so focused on the words, and so you're trying to capture what you're hearing, but you're not really thinking about it. You're not able to respond. You're not engaged. And I want my CEO engaged. So in this case, the board thought about it. We turned it into a teachable moment. And it was like, okay, so what's wrong with this picture? And the picture was, we need to provide, they thought they were saving some money, and in one sense they were, but they were paying their CEO to do something that could have been done more reasonably and more effectively. It was also compounded a couple weeks later when I went back for a follow-up meeting and the superintendent was in her office typing up the minutes that she was reading off the legal pad. Not a good use of your CEO's time. So that means part of your responsibility is to provide the tools necessary. It's not to say, let there be math. Let there be better writing or reading or whatever. It's what do you need to effectively improve whatever we're talking about. If it's reading, do we have to provide additional services, additional staff reading consultants, et cetera. What will help improve that particular area? That's your job to figure out how to find those resources. It's not enough to just say do it, in other words. And finally, it's up to the board to evaluate the quality of lighting. I didn't see much on your agenda tonight, but it's a very busy agenda. But how often in your meetings do you spend time talking about student achievement? How much time, and again, you new folks, you will, I'm sure, as time goes on, but in my mind, it's more effective use of your time when you are talking about what's happening in the classroom. How are the test results, et cetera. So it's a challenge to all of you as you're going about your business to say, should this be on the agenda? Could we do this a different way? And that would free up time to allow you to spend more time talking about achievement, because that's the work of the district. Speaking of the work of the district, I love doing this with school boards. In this case, there's 2,467 little smiley faces on the screen. That means they represent the 2,467 children that are in your school district, that you are responsible for. And I want you to think about not just statistics and numbers, I want you to think about a face behind every one of those little faces. Because those kids, their entire future depends on what happens in your meetings. It really does. If you think about it, we set children up for failure if we fail them in school. And we allow children to be more successful when we provide them a quality education. And so as you go about your business, never forget about those kids, about those faces. And to further compound it, it gets so easy sometimes to think about statistics. I looked very quickly at your profile. It looks like you have about 75% of your kids did well on the index that the state puts out. I don't even want to get into how to explain that because it's way too complicated. And that's just one frame of reference. You will see percentages of in a variety of ways. But let's say it's 90%. That still means there's almost 250 kids that didn't get what they need. That's about, 60 kids, 4 or 5 school buses that you can just pack up and send the kids home because we didn't give them what they needed. And it's not that they can't learn. Sometimes it's more of an old model, but they couldn't learn the way we taught. It's not that they can't learn. So we have to be creative in the way we instruct children, the way we provide those resources. Sometimes it's dealing with trauma. If a kid comes to school traumatized or hungry or tired, they're not going to learn. Now, you can't take over the role of parent, but you have to take into account, if we're going to teach this child, we have to account for that. It doesn't necessarily mean provide a nap for them. It typically means providing a meal. Because again, if a kid comes to school hungry, they need to eat. So I just want you to be thinking about these things as you go about your business on the board. It's about the kids. And that's the reason we all exist. That's why our organization exists. Our mission statement says something to the effect of to help you provide a high quality education for every one of your kids. And that's really the purpose of public schools. Just throwing something out that we kind of rediscovered recently in a workshop we were doing, the Eisenhower matrix. And yes, that Eisenhower. Basically, he sort of looked at work in terms of 4 quadrants. It's either important or it's unimportant, and it's either urgent or it's not urgent. And basically, as you start to look at the work you're doing, if it's urgent and important, you have to do it right away. And typically, that kind of work's done by the superintendent. He's the one that would jump in and do things by policy, because that's one of the ways your policy manual gives guidance. He's got to know that the policy directs things a certain way and must adhere to that. If your policy is unclear, it gets more difficult. So that's why we work on policy year-round and keep trying to improve it. Plus, every time the legislature meets, they require changes in policy. So it's an ongoing process that never ends. If it's not urgent, that's where the board kind of comes in, because that's called planning. You have time, it's thinking strategically, and it's what do we want to do, how do we do it, we can do it in a planned, orderly way. That's really the place we want to be as much as we can. And then if it's unimportant and urgent, well, that's when we start to talk about priorities. Do we have the resources to do it, do we not? Maybe it doesn't get done, but we make those as conscious decisions. And then finally, when it's not urgent and it's unimportant, get it off the table. You don't need to expend limited resources on stuff that's not important and not urgent. And sometimes it may be urgent and it seems important, but then as you get into it, you find out, oh, we could have maybe done something a little different. Over the Christmas holiday, I got 5 emails from my boss, when you come back, do this, do that, do this. And I kept sort of referring to, that's kind of unimportant, you know, in the overall scheme of things, and we joke about it, but it's something we always have to be thoughtful of. I'm gonna make a switch. I hope I can figure out how to do it. Just do it this way. It worked, okay. I'm not sure.
You did?
Yeah, I did. It looks exactly the same, doesn't it?
It does.
I'm good. Okay, so when I first started this work, and it was 26 years ago when I started working with school boards, I was a board member for 10 years prior to that, so I've been around the block a couple times. But when I became a trainer at CAVE, the first thing I thought about is, what do I really want school boards to know? And the State Department of Education prints a big thick book, about 500 pages every couple of years, and it's all the state laws that govern public schools. And I decided I was going to read that book, and I was going to take note of the things I thought were important for board members to know. And I'm going to share some of those tonight. And I'm going to speed through this. We're only going to do 4 or 5. The 2-hour version of only roles would go through a lot more, and we can come back and do more anytime you want.
We'd love to hear from you. Really what we want to do is interact with you.
Yeah,
Tonight we'll push it out so you can come up with your questions and bring them up.
Yeah, so again, I mean, I've been to one town 48 times in the last 20-something years, so I'm more than happy. I was here last in 2003. I don't want to make it 16 years again before I come back. So just please understand that's part of your service, you know, our service to you. So anyway, let's just talk about a couple of the state laws that you really should understand and know about. And that's by PowerPoint. I'm going to read these because they're laws and they're words that are important.
And I'm an attorney and I'm not even going to do that to you. So I'm going to do that to you.
That's right. But the first one I want to share with you is actually the language in the state constitution that talks about public schools. And it says, there shall always be free public elementary and secondary schools in the state. The General Assembly shall implement this principle by appropriate legislation. The Constitution of Connecticut is a state function to provide public schools. The federal government, when they were forming it, they debated making education part of the US Constitution. They decided that should be a function of the state. So it was intentional that states be responsible for educating their children. It's also in the statute, as you can see at the bottom, they gave that responsibility to the General Assembly. Now, they don't want to do it, although they do pass an awful lot of laws every year that try to tell you what to do anyway. But they created a statute that gives you the duties and responsibilities of the Board of Ed. Now, it's actually several pages long in that 500-page book. This is just the first paragraph. Again, sorry, but I'm going to read it. Each local or regional Board of Education shall maintain good public elementary and secondary schools, implement the educational interests of the state as defined in blah, 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 and provide such other educational activities as in its judgment will best serve the interests of the school district. I'd love to have more time to actually have a conversation about this because there's things in here that I'd love you to take and tell me what you see, but I'm going to do that tonight because of time. First and foremost, it doesn't matter why you ran for the Board of Education, and there are a variety of reasons why you might. I want to get rid of the football coach because my kid didn't get to play. I don't like my kid's math teacher. I love the work they're doing in language arts. Whatever reason I want to cut the budget. Whatever reason you ran for the board, the state language starts with maintain good public elementary and secondary schools. Now you can fight all day about what good means, and sometimes boards do that. But the language in my mind is pretty clear. That's the responsibility of the Board of Education. You implement the educational interests of the state. I heard somebody over here talking earlier about we're your representatives and tell us what you need, what you want. And there's a balance to that because you are locally elected and part of the idea is you are the public in the public schools. But the state requires you to do specific tasks. You implement the educational interests of the state. You actually have to answer to the state government about whether you're doing your job or not. The General Assembly has authority over the board, the Commissioner of Education has authority, and the State Board of Ed potentially has authority, and they can take it away. They don't do it very often, it's usually under very extreme conditions, but they have replaced boards, they have appointed receivers and or special masters to come in and take over the district if they felt the board was not looking at the interests of the state. It's a challenge when you're municipally elected and people say, I elected you to do such and such, and then you sometimes have to say, that's really not what we do. And so the quicker you can kind of understand what boards should and shouldn't do, the better it might be, because you don't want to get caught in a situation where you're promising to do something that you don't have the authority for. And so, again, the longer session, we could have a real good conversation about this, and I hope we can come back and do that sometime. But just, again, to hit some of the highlights. And then finally, you provide the educational activities as in your judgment best serve the interests of the school district. There will be other people that are going to tell you what you should do. Even some municipal organizations, Board of Selectmen, Town Council, Board of Finance are going to say, you need to do this, you need to do that, as in your best interest, so, or your best judgment. So the statute gives you the authority to run the schools, and that can be important sometimes. Hopefully you don't get into a condition where the board and the municipal agency are at loggerheads, because then nobody wins. It's good to try to foster a good relationship with them, get them more involved in what you're trying to do, make it their mission as well. But in those situations where it may not be happening that way, you have to make the final word.
What Nick's not saying as well is that he was on a board of education for a very long time as well, and he was chair in a party of one as well. So he is not just speaking this, he's lived it and he understands. So he's bringing this to you through that lens as well.
Yeah, I started out on a board that was 5-2, and it was very political and it was really nasty, and we didn't really accomplish very much the first couple of years. Don't get me started on politics and school board leadership. But in fact, I only had one thing passed in the first 2 years I was a board member, and the only reason they voted for it was because I put the motion up, I thought we needed to do it, but I voted against it. And because I voted against it, it passed. How ludicrous is that? But there's a story behind it, no time. Next time. These teasers are so you want us to come back. So anyway, purposes of the educational interests of the state, and I love the language that they use, shall include but not be limited to, so they can make you do all kinds of stuff. Basically, this first one, there's 2 words that really stand out: equal opportunity. You have to provide equal opportunity for children to receive that suitable program of experiences. So that's sort of the onus for how we take care of children with special needs who are exceptional in any way, that you have to provide the resources to make sure that everyone is treated fairly. Second one, this one's really broken. You have to meet the minimum expenditure requirement. School funding is so shattered right now. There is, I don't know if you want to jump in on some of the legal stuff.
That's a whole nother meeting, Nick.
Yeah, you're right. Let's let that. I'm going to come up with a couple things on a different side.
I think this one is a good one to go right past, because we could argue that a million ways, but
you are mandated to adhere to mandates. You are mandated to adhere to mandates.
I forgot.
Thank you. The one word left out of the statute is unfunded, because typically when our illustrious leaders in the state capitol make you do something else, they do 2 things. 1, they don't pay for it. 2, they don't give you more time. So you're adding and you're adding and you're adding and you're adding, and the only way you add when you have, it's like a balloon. It can get bigger and bigger and bigger till it pops, but you don't get another balloon. So that's one of the challenges that, again, I'd love to spend more time on how that affects you in different ways. This is the short one. And then finally, because in particular Chef versus O'Neill, they added a statute that says you have to provide children in your district opportunities to interact with others, adults and children from different backgrounds, basically. And every district has to do it differently. I'm assuming here it's probably harder, maybe Wyndham, for example, might be close enough, or I'm not even sure where else, because you're more isolated, but you still have to provide some sort of resource for the kids. I'm going to skip through some of these, because not that they're unimportant. Let's talk about policies just for a second. Quick second. Previous. the legislature often, rather than mandate something, will say, you have to have a policy on it. Frankly, if we think it's going to pass, that's a strategy our legislative people will go to, because rather than one law that's going to affect 169 school districts, some well, some poorly, would rather see them mandate a policy. You have to write a policy on, for instance, homework or attendance.
And homework's a perfect example because whatever the experience was, a legislator wanted there to be very specific requirements for homework in very specific categories for every single district. And so we had a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions around, well, how about boards have a policy? Because again, they are looking at the best judgment of what will work in their district. And that can be as simple as it is in some districts as there will be homework. And then in other districts, it's much more prescribed. But that was something that we fought, again, regularly we do, but that's just a very good example of something we spent 2 sessions on to get to that point, to say districts are gonna know best and talk with their superintendents who are gonna talk with their administrators and their teachers about how best to address this, and then you are gonna take that into account and adopt a policy.
I worked with one board where they wanted to talk about writing policy, so we decided instead of just a lecture on here's how you do it, here's the process, let's pick a subject and have a session on that. They picked homework because they were actually looking at a homework policy. And we spent about 2.5 hours just talking about homework. It wasn't, let's mandate this, let's mandate that, but just brainstorming. And one board member said something that really resonated with everybody: homework shouldn't be punishment. Now, I think back to when I was a kid, go home and write 200 times, I will not talk in class. Or
I'm not
300,
surprised.
or 400, yeah. Yeah, us introverts have that problem. The problem is, though, that especially now, there's so much competition for kids' time. And kids are, I'm gonna say, they're more sophisticated than we were. We were told, do your homework. We did our homework, or not, but most of the time we did our homework. Nowadays, you say to your kid, do your homework, they go, why? Explain to me why this is going to help me be better in my math class or my English class or in science or social studies. Why is this relevant? And you know what? They're right. If we're giving them busy work, if they're giving them tasks that really have no reference to learning, shame on us. And so they had that conversation that night about what good homework looked like, and now the administration goes back, crafted a policy based on everything they heard, and then the board worked through their policy committee and they eventually passed it, but it was about why homework, not how. And they didn't say, like in our district, we had kindergarten 15 minutes, first grade half hour, second grade hour. Our teachers went nuts because they were spending hours a day making sure the kids did minutes of homework, and what a terrible use of their time. So that's another example. But you want to make sure that, and part of your superintendent's responsibility is to know the laws when they change and make sure that your policies are brought up to compliance. That's one of the services we provide, by the way. Our staff goes in after the legislative session, they go through every bit of legislation and make sure that a policy's drafted that's compliant with the new laws, and then we share that with all our members. And that's one way we try to help you, so you don't have to be the experts on all of these things, or go back through and read all the legislation. Oh, by the way, I hate it when you have these, you have to hit the button. Previous. Reporting the bus complaints is not call your school board member and have them fix the problem. There should be a policy that has a staff-driven process for dealing with buses. That's not our job as board members to fix a bus problem. You are required to hire a superintendent of schools. I know one district where they went through 4 or 5 in a 1-year period, and the board chair declared, you know what, we're not gonna bother getting another one, we're gonna just do it ourselves. And the commissioner called the board chair and said, you could possibly go to jail if you don't change your mind. So you are mandated to hire a superintendent of schools. They have to have specific licensure and such. And the statute's pretty clear. That's the chief executive officer. I used that term before. It has executive authority over the school system, responsibility for supervision. The superintendent of schools, working with his administrative teams, run the schools. You set the policy, you say let there be light. It's his responsibility, working with staff, to figure out how to do that effectively. Two of the biggest responsibilities you have, two of them are, these two are sort of like, well, one is a one-shot. You hire the superintendent, that's only done as needed, but you are annually required to evaluate the superintendent. And again, in the long version, we could talk more about evaluation. I only want to point out that the law is very clear that the process must be mutually determined and agreed upon. So the board can't unilaterally say, you know what, we're going to change how we do it this year. It's a process that has to be done together with the superintendent.
Among the leadership team, which is what you guys were.
Right. And I only say that because I've seen too many boards get caught up in, look what we did, the superintendent said, I don't approve, I don't accept it. We don't want to put you in that situation either. Your superintendent's responsible for evaluating everybody else, through other administrators, et cetera. You should have a broad idea of how evaluations are done and get a report every year on kind of the standard. We had X number that were excellent, et cetera. Here's what happens when the teacher needs improvement. They might have more intensive observations, et cetera, but you don't see the evaluations. You don't know that Mrs. Jones got an excellent, Mr. Smith got a needs improvement. That's not, in fact, they're protected by law. You can't see that stuff. So, and one thing, I didn't say it yet, I usually repeat myself 100 times with this, you do not have any authority outside of a board meeting. Board of Education members are a member of a board. The legal authority comes to the organization known as the Tolland Board of Education. When you are in a legal meeting, in session, doing appropriate work, you have authority through your voting. That's how the board exercises authority. We don't have the ability to just go around schools and, hey, clean that up, do this, do that. I will tell you a quick story. We had she was a principal in a different district. She was on our board, and she came in at the board meeting one night and said, she had a legal pad with about 5 full pages, legal, the longer 14-inch, whatever, line after line after line. There was a bucket of rags by the janitor's closet. The light bulb over the principal's office door was out. Crazy stuff. And she wanted this read into the minutes. They refused. And they wanted the superintendent to deal with it. And he had a little round basket behind him, and it kind of ended up in there, because that was not her responsibility.
And not the right way to go about it is the other
Correct.
thing. There's certainly, we want people to know, and your staff and your superintendent to know when things come up. You want to pass that information along. What you don't want to be is the person who's sort of the arbiter of all of those things, because that's why you hire a superintendent, and that's why you look to your superintendent to hire others. Again, it's when it's quick, this sounds a lot more negative and punitive than it really is. It's really more about the fact that I see my job in a big way to keep you out of harm's way. And that includes keeping you out of places where you can end up in conflict with contracts and all kinds of things. We want you to utilize the system that you have in the best way possible and go through that chain and put your skills to good use. You may be a facilities person, so maybe there's a great place for you on the facilities committee, and let's do that instead.
Well, but when I was a board member, I was also a plumbing contractor, and I refused to inspect the boilers. They actually asked me to do that once. I said, that's not my job. Interestingly enough, I visited the high school at the same time, and it was a mess. I mean, there was no question the high school was a mess. So I called the superintendent, and I just said, I'm just passing this on. I was in high school, my daughter at a volleyball game. It was really kind of messy. What's going on? And he said, well, you remember last year when we had the budget issues and we cut custodial staff at the high school? Yep. Well, you know, we have a flu epidemic going on right now, right? Yep. Okay, we have one custodian in the high school. That's it, everybody else is out sick. We made an executive decision that one custodian would work all night cleaning up the school, so when the kids came in the morning, the building was presentable. There wasn't somebody to keep cleaning all day, but that was the problem. Now, as a board member, I then had to think about what's our role, and our role was, you know what, bring it to the board. Maybe we have to find money for another custodian because it's obviously not working. That's, again, taking it to the level of, 30,000 feet rather than in the weeds. What's my role in making sure this gets resolved? But it wasn't giving them a list. It was, hey, I did notice, is there something going on? And he had a reasonable answer to that. This is my favorite. We only have a couple more. Because this is about your budget. Or this is the last time we're going to use that word tonight, this budget.
It's not.
I just- I bring good news.
I'd venture to say 100.
So let's talk about the statute. Each local board of education shall prepare an itemized estimate of the cost of maintenance of public schools for the ensuing year and shall submit such estimate to the Board of Finance. The money appropriated by any municipality for the maintenance of public schools shall be expended by and in the discretion of the Board of Education. So let's start with itemized estimate. When I think of the word budget, and the way most people think of the word budget, it is, we have a column on the left that says what we're gonna spend, we have a column on the right that says what we did spend, and they better be exactly the same. That's good budget. Well, we don't do that in school systems, because if you could spend every penny on July 1st, you'd probably get about 99% of that budget spent appropriately, the way you'd written it down. But on July 2nd, maybe a family moves in with some children that have extra needs. Maybe it's a boiler that goes defunct during the middle of the winter. Flu epidemic, our substitute account just went through the roof. Lots of things happen in the school district, and I'm saying this without any sarcasm. In their infinite wisdom, the legislature understood that when they crafted this statute. They understood that it's a moving target, it's a fluid document. And so I think you need to make sure your community members understand this is what we want to do, this is our vision, this is our judgment on where we believe the money should be spent, but always recognizing that that might not happen and that it's not bad budgeting if it doesn't. That something comes along that changes priorities midstream and then we have to change it. And I would say that even on the document that you hand out to your community, itemized estimate of expenditures or spending plan, to get out of the idea that it's a budget, because a budget is finite, and what you're doing is far more, I hate to use the word relaxed, but it is fluid. Thank you, that's the word I was thinking of. That's why we work well together. So it's important, and the other reason it's important is because as you start to debate that document that's going to go to your community and to your finance board, you're gonna have priorities of your own. You're gonna have things that you like or don't like, but the reality is we get so caught up in these things, we get very emotional about them, and 6 months from now, we may not be able to do it, or we may be able to do it, but because it's a fluid document and things will change, if we get so wrapped up in something, our board thought about snow blowers. We gotta buy 5 horsepower snow blowers, we gotta save money, no, we need 7 horsepower snow blowers. 10, I mean, we fought for close to an hour one night about what snow blowers to buy. What a waste of our time and what a waste of our staff's time. That is not leadership, that's micromanaging. The superintendent convinced the board, we need X amount of money for grounds and maintenance in terms of snow removal. Let our staff make the decisions where it can be done best, and that was what happened. And as an example, I think it was Ledger a couple of years ago, about 4 years now, when it happened, we had such a heavy snowfall, they had to spend, I'm gonna say it was like $600,000 to clear the snow off the high school roofs because they were afraid it was gonna collapse. They didn't budget for that. There was no way they could foresee that, but it was gonna get spent. They had to do that. So that's an example of why we don't wanna get so wrapped up in this. And I'm gonna give you a clue. When you have a budget line item to purchase something, your business officials are looking at the best price. So you have to have a placeholder, you have to have a number. And typically what's, at least the practice used to be, there's catalogs. You look at the catalog, it'll give you a price on, we used to use VCRs, we don't do that anymore. It's been a long time. So that's an example of, there's a number, and they're always shopping. So when your community, at the end of the year, when your community's upset because you saved money, we have an extra $100,000 at the end of the year sometimes. That's not bad management, that's good management. We worked hard to make sure every dollar was spent wisely. And I'll go right to it next. Well, actually, I'll just add, you expend them at your discretion. So if you don't want to use the town attorney and the town's saying you will use the town attorney, your discretion. What I did want to say, you have the right to transfer money. So if at the end of the year you were really good at saving in certain areas, And you're not wasting it, you're not spending money foolishly, you're probably buying stuff that you needed right from the beginning and you never purchased because, or it wasn't in the budget originally, because you had to make that hard choice early on. But now we've been really careful about how we've spent the money. Now maybe we can come back and look at some of the things that were priorities and we didn't get to do them. You have the right to do that though. Last one, and then Rebecca's gonna do a whole FOI, well, she's the expert. I just had to make a lot of mistakes along the way. And I will say, she knows this stuff because she's a lawyer and she studied this stuff. I know this stuff because I made a lot of mistakes and I learned from them. So we both want to make sure you don't make those same mistakes. Last but not least, and again, I'm gonna throw some more things out here because I might want to scare you just a little bit. Just a little. I don't want you to walk out here petrified. Each Board of Education shall protect and save harmless any member of such board which acts are not wanton, reckless, or malicious, and within the, that should really say within the board statutory authority, but it works for board members too. Let's start with the bottom part. If this board makes a decision that's within your authority, so you had the responsibility to make a decision, like if there was a recommendation, for example, to terminate a teacher, and the board, in an impartial hearing, that's the judicial hat you wear, in an impartial hearing based only on evidence presented in that hearing, you determine that person should be terminated, they can sue. Frankly, they probably will sue. That's their right, they have due process rights. When they do, if you make the decision and there's no funny business, they can't show a wanton, reckless, or malicious act, for example. If there's a lawsuit, if there's a judgment against the board, the district pays for it, it's typically covered by insurance, but you don't, because you're held harmless. But if it's something you said, you know, that was something I said, if it is, you might get sued individually. We let a teacher go, and it was a rip, that we had too many vice principals at our high school, 10% budget cut, that was one of the places we made a tough decision. We negotiated with the union, the employee that was going to be terminated, he sued. We got bad legal advice, frankly. Our sort of attorney, our legal expert, let me call him that, said, well, he's suing, it's a pending thing, we can't give him a letter of recommendation because he's suing us. Trying to put pressure on him to drop his lawsuit, but it went 5 years and he didn't drop his lawsuit, but he couldn't get another job because there was no letter of recommendation. When he won his third level appeal, I think it was, and he won because they found out he got his 30-day notice on the 31st day. That's how serious these things are. It's very important that you make sure all legal processes are adhered to, because that's when judges turn around and overturn things. They don't necessarily say you were wrong in what you did, but how you did, and they will overturn the judgment. But here's the thing that was going on behind the scenes that caused this thing to get resolved quicker than it probably should have. And 5 years, but it was quicker than it should have. They countersued our board chair and said she was going around town saying this guy was the one let go because he was a drunk. Now imagine that getting out in the community, the board chair is going around calling an employee a drunk. That, the immediate pressure to settle, right at that point. It was like, we have to resolve this, let's not go any further. I mean, it was ugly. Those are the kinds of off-the-cuff comments you might make at some point, and they are going to bite you and they are going to bite the board in an uncomfortable place. They do all the time. We had a grievance hearing. Grievances aren't as serious, they're still serious. It's a hearing of the board. Should have been a 5-minute meeting. The teacher was appealing her evaluation. I didn't like my evaluation, I'm filing a grievance. That's not grievable. You can't file a grievance on that. So they should have presented their complaint. We should have said, not a grievable subject, we're going to close the meeting. That's what should have happened. But what happened instead was the attorney representing the teacher pointed to a board member and said, Mr. Jones, isn't it true that you were in the supermarket on April 12th and you said to Mr. So-and-so that this was the worst teacher your child ever had? How did you hear that? Doesn't matter how we heard it, is it true? Vinny Lafredo was the lawyer, by the way.
I know.
I'm
a Middletowner.
Yeah, yeah, it is true, but how did you hear that? Well, we had to recess the meeting, we had to call our lawyer, by then we had Shipman, so we were paying the big bucks, but getting a good lawyer. She was available, so she had to drive in from about 20 miles away, and then we had a 5-hour meeting. Should have been a 5-minute meeting. Now, because it was a grievance, and that's about the contract being violated, we came to the same exact decision we would have 5 hours earlier, but because we had to ensure that this teacher did not have a case of a prejudicial member of the board, we had to make sure every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and that meant a lawyer sitting there checking on every little thing that was done. So again, you know, the old maybe saying loose lips sink ships, you want to be incredibly careful what you say as a board member. You're never just a citizen. And with social media out there, and hopefully Rebecca will maybe talk a little about social media too, or we will, because there's a lot of good stuff with that you probably have questions about. The reality is you can't ever take it back. It's there forever. And sometimes it's misunderstood, sometimes it's not, I didn't mean that, doesn't matter. It's there forever. And so the better way is not to say a word. So I just wanted to sort of end with that as far as this part goes. This is the short version, like I said, and I apologize for that. Do you want to start by asking questions? Do you want to do an overview? Or do you want me to put that other PowerPoint in?
You can go ahead and put it in, everybody has a copy of it. And so now for the good news, I feel like I should do a tap dance or something. It is fun sometimes when people get together, lawyers, board members, whatever, and we can tell the horror stories. I don't have horror stories coming out of here, and most places do not have horror stories generally. Every once in a while, everybody has some kind of creepy thing that happens. But so Nick can talk about the examples, and actually, some of the stuff he does in his, mistakes not to make used to be called 10 mistakes he made when he was a board member. So he got to learn the hard way. I did too. I mean, I'm, boo hiss, recovering Board of Finance chair, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education as well. So a lot of the mistakes I made informed my decisions. Really with FOI, what I want to do is give you the tools to make good decisions. There is, and Tom Hennick and the FOI folks will tell you, FOIC folks will tell you too, that...
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just let me know which one.
Sure. That, let's see, so put up what the date most recently modified.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And
you just worked on that, Tolland.
Yeah, the FOI. Okay. So that you're not always we don't always get it right. The point is to let you know the basics and what the intent is so that you can make the best decision possible, and that's defensible. Well, there's so many things I want to say after that, but I'm not going to say any of them. So before we start this, is there anything out of that you want to ask a particular question about, or?
I'm going to ask you to move again. I'm going to get the flip chart in case we have to write something down.
Okay, all right, well, we will move. All right, so the Freedom of Information Act is basically, it's public policy. The legislature decided, as all legislatures have, it's a sunshine law. Essentially, your meetings of boards, public agencies should be held in public, and records of public agencies should be available for folks to either have copies or to observe. I think a really important point about that is that you are having a business meeting in public. It is not a public meeting in terms of you are not having a meeting with the public. Sometimes you do. Sometimes what happens is there's a huge topic and a whole bunch of people show up and you have a lot of business to do and you need to do it. And the board chair says, we hear you and we see you, and so here's what we're going to do about that. We only have this much time and we have this amount of business to do, and that's a tool. Again, the idea is that you're here doing your business in public so folks can observe what you are doing, see it, see the decisions you make. That's the full intent. To the extent that you do, and this is much later in the slides, but to the extent that you do, and it's a good thing to do, to have public comment, it's not required, but it's something you want to do because you want to hear what people have to say. I did not bring it tonight, but I've sent to a number of districts and boards recently a statement that a lot of boards are now putting on their agenda, or the board chair is reading at the beginning, to let people know what the fact that this is our board meeting, our business meeting in public,
and that you're here and we want to hear from you. We are not going to be in an interactive process in this particular meeting. We want to hear, we will definitely send things to the right people to follow up, but that this is not a meeting where we're going to be having interactions, not because we don't respect what you have to say, but because we are here to do business. And then it also sets out some rules about, so here's what we're expecting to hear. If, we're not expecting to hear attacks and things like that, but you have the right to speak on topics unless you limit your topics to the agenda. You're able to talk on everything within these limitations. We're not going to be having a dialogue tonight. There are times, again, as I said, in my district, I'm in a regional district, and we've now closed 2 elementary schools. So you can imagine that the work around that and the redistricting plans around that have been very intense, and there needed to be public hearings and sort of forums and listening towards where there was some interaction. But this meeting, your business meeting, is not set up to be that. You have business to do. So, but it needs to be in public so people know what it is that you're doing. Those are the basic, and then the FOI, of course, it's law, so it has a lot of exceptions and exemptions. So public agencies, so it's public agencies, meetings are in public and their records are available to the public. You are a public agency, and all your subcommittees, committees, any other bodies that you form are also public agencies, and they're subject to basically the same rules. We'll get to sort of when's a meeting, not a meeting later, but to the extent that you have regular committees and subcommittees, those rules are still going to apply. Not sure what you do, but we recommend that subcommittee meetings be scheduled just like you schedule your regular meetings at the beginning of the year. Most folks are doing that now. It avoids you having to have a special meeting every time you want to do something. So what's a meeting? This becomes important because of this issue about the quorum. So any hearing or other proceeding of a public agency, that stands by itself. There's no word quorum in that section. Any convening or assembly of a quorum of and et cetera, whether in person or by electronic equipment, which is what it still says, which means texting, social media, anything you can think of, just about. So this is where I caution boards and that anytime more than 2 of you are talking about business over which you have jurisdiction, the FOIC may see that as a meeting. We're waiting on a decision at the Supreme Court of Connecticut right now. The bottom line is really to think about, is just to think, we want you to do your business here or in any gathering where you're going to get together to do your business. We want you to discuss things. So to the extent that you find yourself looking to, and I know I've been there, sort of looking to be talking without doing that, that's when I know, okay, I really need to come up with a different way because this really needs to be discussed in public. It doesn't mean that you can't ask for information, especially on actions that have already been taken place, but if it's gonna happen and you have jurisdiction over it, then it's most likely that you're having a meeting if you're talking business among more than 2 of you, at least according to the Freedom of Information Commission.
I just throw out, go ahead.
What about caucusing?
Okay, so we'll get to that. That is a non-meeting. As Nick will tell you, he and I are big non-fans of caucuses, at least here. The time I get it, when you're having an organizational meeting, sometimes that is the absolute best way to come to some kind of agreement, especially when seats have changed and roles have changed, to where people can go off and have a conversation and then sort of figure out what's the best way to do this. A caucus is a political party sitting together to talk in the realm of political party. That doesn't mean that you aren't utilizing that differently for information, but the fact is what we want you to be is a board. If you are going to be having caucuses for whatever reason, and every place is different, I'd prefer to see that by far be something that you're doing away from here. But again, none of us you are each individual members a part of this whole, and we want to hear discussion and debate from every single one of you from your standpoint, and so that all of you can hear that. So that there's not one voice coming out of a caucus around an issue all of the time, because what we want is for each of you to bring yourselves and your information and your skills and your thoughts to this table, because you're all here for very good reasons, and you're gonna hear things a lot more if it's happening here rather than happening there and then coming back to here.
Just to jump in, because that was one of the places I got very frustrated, and I, when Rebecca was talking about the mistakes I made, that's how it started. So my boss, who's also an attorney, says you can't admit to half this stuff. But I was one of those board members that acted out because I was very frustrated. When you walk into a meeting and the chair comes up and says, we had a caucus last night, this is what we're gonna do. It wasn't, here's what we're thinking about, what do you think? It's like, this is what's going to happen. You don't matter. You don't count. And if you don't think that that made me very frustrated, you're wrong. And so I acted out, because if they're not gonna even let me talk, I'm gonna get attention some other way. Now, that's immature and it's not right, but that's how frustrating it can be when you sort of don't allow, Robert's Rules was designed to give the majority an opportunity to move forward, but the minority to keep their voice. And if you aren't feeling that you have part of your voice, you're gonna try to be heard some other way, usually not in an effective or necessarily good way, but you're going to want to be heard, because whether I vote yes or I vote no, people deserve to know why I'm doing that. And if I can't do it here, I'll do it in the newspaper. And that's a big no-no. We don't take it to the streets. We make a decision and we live with it. But if you're not allowed to participate, you are not going to own it. And so, again, for a lot of good reasons, the two of us have just seen caucuses. And Rebecca made a good point. If you have to do it before you come to the meeting. I go to boards, I work with boards where they literally recess the meeting in the middle of the meeting and run to the two corners. And they're in the corners.
A lot. I'm not just talking about.
And if you don't think that the people in the audience are noticing that and going, what's going on, it just looks bad.
And this
so
is also,
rethink it.
this is also where you're balancing the fact that you've been elected. You ran on a slate. I've run on a lot of slates. You ran on one, you ran with people. That's why I say around the organizational meeting, the fact that, especially when the minority changes, that the chair is going to be the new party or whatever. That's natural. That's normal. I wouldn't expect. Sometimes it goes other ways. But once you've gotten past that point and you've elected your leadership, I have great faith in you, all of you sitting at this table, to share your ideas with everyone else. You don't, I don't think any one of you needs to have that in order to share and in order to be heard and to talk. Now, I'm not going to tell, and I never will, I'm not going to tell you how to do business if it's working for you. There are some boards that have been so out of control that in order to restore order, what they've done is use that caucus process very well, because otherwise it would be insane, and then they use that to go back to the high pressure parties outside, but it doesn't last for long. They had to do that to gain control. It is a non-meeting. It is something like, if you're going, I've seen, and I know that has happened here in other places, you don't have to make a motion. You can sit, you can ask for a recess and say, we'd like to caucus and all those things, but I really encourage you to think about it, because each one of you around this table also ran in your own right. And as a board, it's difficult. Again, as I said, recovering Board of Finance chair. My mother was the Board of Education chair at the exact same time that I was elected Board of Finance chair. That Thanksgiving was terrible.
You slept in the garage.
It was terrible. Thank God I didn't live there. We had and I wasn't as bad as some might be, but I had some misunderstanding about how different her role and this board's role is from my role. And that takes some building, some understanding, which I do with a lot of communities. I worked on the municipal side and in those areas first, and it's hard because the hardest thing I think in this job is that the public, many of them, not everyone, thinks your job is something other than it is, wants it to be something other than it is, and the municipalities also are very upset about that part of the statute that Nick pointed out, where once that budget is yours, it's in your discretion. They can't tell you 5 teachers have to. They want to, because that's what they do every day. And to find a way to build that understanding can be very difficult, but there's a reason for it. You are a statutory creature. You have to maintain the interests of every single child in this district, whatever party, whatever location, whatever district, no matter how we rank. And so we're trying to give you all the tools we can to help you. That was a way different question than you asked. But it is a non-meeting, and you can do that without any of the rest, and it is a
And I
right.
wasn't talking about within the meeting, I meant like
Outside, and sometimes, and again, I am not gonna tell you.
We have done within the meeting, only because minority representation is not involved in the making of the agenda, so. There's
Well, and
issues
so,
there.
gotcha, and like I said, there are gonna be times where that is something to say like, hey, we need to talk, let's talk about this, how are we wanna do this well. I am not gonna tell you what's gonna work best for you.
I will, one other thing that's very important too is that it's only the members of the board from that same party that can
Right.
caucus. I know in our town council used to meet with the town committee chair, and that was a violation of FOI. So you can't meet with outsiders. In fact, at one point they caucused and they called the town manager in. And that's when I was on the town council, and I was.
That's a great example of a time where something did come up that you need to sort of say like, well, maybe we do kind of huddle about this because we don't want to blow up this meeting, but we need to find a way to come at it. Fair enough. Fair enough. Only you are gonna know those things. It's just in general, I've seen it be.
It shouldn't be a standard tool that you use all the time.
But yes, absolutely, it is a non-meeting and you can feel like you guys can sit, a quorum can sit together as a caucus somewhere, and that's not a meeting. It's on the list of not meetings, bargaining, when you're a bargaining committee, and there's a list of those, and we'll just move along. So, these are these inadvertent meetings that are really electronic meetings. Any of this, like one email goes to another person, goes to another person, goes to another any of that kind of stuff. As I said, my job is to keep you guys out of harm's way. So, if you're, you've heard it all, don't hit reply to all, and definitely don't hit reply all. And try not to be in a situation where that's even gonna happen. Like email communications from your chair or from you should be limited to the agenda or items where it's, informational purposes only, because it's too easy for that to go awry. Not because you don't know what to do, but it's just, I've done it badly. And I'm not gonna say that I haven't, so it's, somebody should disable my reply to all, but.
Do you have district supplied email addresses, by the way?
Yes.
Use them.
Well, the best thing about that too is, right, so now, it all lives on the server here. When they get most of this stuff, I'm gonna stick to meetings, because most of this stuff you're never gonna have to deal with. Your central office is top notch. They're the ones on top of notice, agenda, all of those things, and also records. But it needs to be that your stuff lives on the server, so when that person for the 17th time comes in with that same request for all emails for everyone, you don't have to turn over hard drives, devices, and they don't have to go looking for it. It's all here that makes their life as easy as FOI can be.
Yeah, and if one email discovered in a search with your personal email address, they're gonna wanna see your computer. And if you do it at work, they're gonna take your work computer, and I know one employee that actually was suspended till she got her computer back. So it can be harsh.
So bottom line, in terms of what are you gonna call things, the guy that I work with from Pullman mostly says, don't be cute, don't be too cute. A retreat, if you're gonna talk about board business, or a workshop, if you're gonna conduct board business, is still a meeting. There are things you can do in executive session, and we will get there. But it's not about what you call it, it's about what it is. So if you're convening anywhere in any manner to work on items that you have jurisdiction over, then you're having a meeting. Now, the good news on that, I know it was for me, was when we used to do budget workshops, tons and tons of them, you don't have to have a quorum. It could be a bad thing, but in that case, I found it to be a good thing. You don't have to have a quorum to have a budget workshop. If you're not, you can't take any binding action, but if you can't get enough people, you still need to go forward, it needs to happen, you can do it. And, while you wanna all be there, that for me was a great tool on the Board of Finance, because we had, 20 different departments coming in, and not everybody could make meetings every single night. But we could still go ahead and have minutes from that, and have people know what happened there, or a tape. And that was beneficial to everyone, but you didn't have to halt business because you couldn't get a quorum of people there. So we talked about this already, folks can be here, they can tape record. I recently had an issue where a board member, most places are taping, so it's not usually an issue, but in a district where they were not, a board member was taping, other board members got upset, and we sort of did the whoa, 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 whoa. Anybody can do that, it's okay, you know, maybe we just need to get you guys online like everyone else, so you get a chance to, you can actually go back and watch and listen to the meeting. I find that to be a plus. So you've got 3 types of meetings. You've got your regular meetings, your special meetings, and your emergency meetings. Your regular meetings are the ones at the beginning of the year you adopt, a schedule for those, and that's when you meet, and same for your subcommittees, and when you meet, you're gonna send out, there's gonna be agendas and notice, but the public already knows that those are your regular meetings. So that means at those meetings, you can add things to the agenda, essentially is the big difference between that and a special meeting. Special meetings, I also say, were so special, but they're not really that special. They just mean they aren't held on the nights that you filed your list of meetings for. Now, this is where the town clerks will often, depends on the town, tell you you can never change your regular meetings. That's not true. If for some reason you see down the line that you've booked a meeting on a holiday and November, or a date that people can't be there, as long as it's 30 days ahead of time, and what I recommend doing is actually republishing the entire list of your regular meetings, you can change that meeting and make it a regular meeting on a different notice, but it has to be more than 30 days out. And again, as I said, I recommend if you see that, you do that and then you resend your list of, okay, now these are our regular meeting dates. You can change regular meeting dates. So really, special meeting, the only difference is you cannot add items to the agenda. And that doesn't mean you have to act on all agenda items. I've had people call me and say, well, but we took something off the agenda or we didn't do it. And you're not bound, if you can't get to all your agenda items, you don't have to get to all your agenda. You just can't add anything. And at a regular meeting, to add an agenda item, you need a motion and a second, and you need a 2/3 vote of those who are here present and voting. Emergency meetings almost never happen. The famous emergency call I got, kid you not, 3 weeks ago, I didn't have time to file the agenda. And so we have to have this meeting because we have a couple things on it we have to do, so it's an emergency. So I'm gonna file it today. I'm like, oh, thank you for calling me today and not calling me tomorrow after you held the emergency meeting, which is often when I get that. An emergency really, the best example is in, when you have weather events. We had a situation where they needed to open the high school as a shelter, and they needed to, they needed personnel, they needed to do some things and vote on a couple of items, and that had to happen then, so that they could open that emergency shelter. That was an emergency. And the reason they're so restrictive is you don't have to have an agenda, you don't have to have notice, you don't have to have anything until right afterwards. You do it as soon as possible. Rare, but it does happen, and your superintendent will let you know, and that's a good time to call your lawyer too, or me. So the statute doesn't say what your agenda, how specific it has to be. Basically, you want to give people the basics, and also you want to describe your items of business with enough specificity so that the public will understand what you're going to be talking about or voting on. That means that agenda items like new business and old business without anything under them are frowned upon by the Freedom of Information Commission. However, all those cases are very fact specific. If you're not going to act on something and someone says, wait, this is new and I want to bring it up, I recommend you add it to the agenda. But in a regular meeting where you can add things to the agenda, I don't think that's such a big deal. Where that comes into play is if you're in a special meeting, you don't ever want to have new business, old business without something underneath it on your special meeting agenda. That just gives those folks, those people who that's what they want to do all day, the opportunity. I have one, and I've known her my whole life, and she does that. I've changed the way all my non-wetlands agendas look to deal with that. But I just want you not to have to have your time taken up with that. So don't have it on your special meeting agendas, and even on your regular meeting agendas. I would say, especially for something like new business, that's where you get a chance to say, these are the new policies that are coming up. So you can let people know this is new. And you can utilize that tool however you'd like. I think that's a good way of doing that if it works for you. Okay, so you've got to vote in public. And as far as the records of your votes, again, your central office folks are going to send off within 24 hours. They've got to have in their place of business a record of how you voted. And everybody's vote has to be recorded. That's why we don't do it by secret ballot or any of that. Everyone's vote needs to be recorded with their name. And really, when it comes down to minutes for them, I mean, everybody does minutes differently, but all that really has to be there is who was there and what business you actually did and how people voted. We want there to be more, and you've got recordings, so that's good as well. But in terms of legal requirements for your folks, when they call me in a panic, I say, okay, what does it say? All right, that will work. So this is a point that comes up all the time. I absolutely 100% recommend that your folks file with the town clerk as well as in your business office. What you need to know for your own purposes is that you don't have to panic if somebody calls you up and says, the meeting didn't get to the clerk, or the clerk wasn't there, or something happened. There are several cases. The statute says what the statute says. The cases say you are a separate entity from the town. The statute describes agencies of the town as having to send to the town clerk's office. It will not invalidate your meeting is all. If you want to do it, they will do it every time they can. But there are times when you've had your agenda noticed, everything's there, it's been in your business office, it's on your website, but for some reason it doesn't get to the town clerk. Very rare, but that will not invalidate your meeting. So that's what I get when Central says, board member called me in a panic, we can't do it, it's not gonna happen. And I say, all right, well, let's look at the circumstances. Sometimes you have to decide, is it best to do it or not? But under the law, you can still go ahead with your meeting. And that's simply why I bring that up, to let you know. We never want to go around. People go to the town hall, they expect to see things there, we understand that. But it's not the legal requirement that it be there, so if something misses out, you can still go ahead.
Yeah, I was really happy when Rebecca first mentioned that the first time, because lots of times your business meetings are going to be noticed, but sometimes the workshops and the special meetings kind of get left off. And oh gee, we didn't send it to, I'm the one that usually got the call that afternoon saying we're not having a meeting tonight. And it's nice to know now we can say, yes, you can.
And it depends on the circumstances. I had dealt with that in a retreat situation recently. And the politics were such and the situation was such that they made the decision to cancel the meeting and reschedule it. It's just to let you know that you don't have to, that's all. So executive sessions. This is where their non-meetings and executive sessions are the two areas where you can exclude the public for your meetings. So to go into executive session, and this just happened on my own board. I was married a year ago. My husband works in the car business and does not deal with this stuff at all. And I was not at a meeting, and he was there, and he called me livid. I was on a business trip. The board just went into executive session and nobody voted, and there wasn't a 2/3 vote. And I tried to raise it, and because the person who bothered about that stuff was in the audience. And when I got back, I said, guys, what happened? And they said, what do you mean? We all kind of agreed to go into executive session. I said, oh, well, now I stand corrected. So you have to vote by 2/3. You should have a motion in a second and vote by 2/3, just because if everyone says yes, well then that's unanimous. But it happened in my own backyard, and I was very embarrassed by it because I was saying, well, no, that can't possibly be true. That would never happen on my board. But you do need a 2/3. I wasn't there. That's not an excuse. You need a 2/3 vote to go in. Because sometimes you may not get one, for whatever reason. You need to provide some specificity as to why you're going. I'm going to give you the 5 and only 5 reasons you can go in. Generally, if it's on your agenda, you want it to say section so-and-so of the statute personnel matter, not just personnel matter, concerning discipline of a student, like you did on your earlier meeting. You want to have some, and your superintendent and your central office staff are going to walk you through that. Again, this is stuff that other people are mostly going to do for you. At this point, who can attend besides board members? The statute says it's just you and the people you need to get done what you need to get done. So if you need your architect for a period of time on a safety thing, that architect stays only as long as you need that person. It's meant to be a place for you to be, having discussions that you're allowed to have with the folks that you need. Only discussion, that is definitely the call I used to get. So we voted in executive session last night. I was like, no, you didn't. You definitely did not. But actions get invalidated that way. So you go in, you discuss, you come out, and you vote. All votes have to be in public. Minutes around executive session just say who went in, unless you are interviewing candidates for a position. Then the statute allows you not to do that for good reasons. 5 legal matters.
Can I just throw one in too while we're at it? One of the things I was taught early on, and I found it very helpful, sometimes it was tedious, but it was helpful, If you are going to have more than one item discussed in executive session, treat them as separate items on your agenda. So have the personnel decision, even to, we were gonna vote to accept resignations. We chose to go in, hear what we had to hear, come out, vote, go back in, hear the next one, come out, vote. So that if you did a whole bunch of things in executive session and one thing was improper, it could be argued that everything gets invalidated, you'd have to fight it. So it's better just treat each item as a separate item. And again, we used to joke about it, hands up, hands down, but it's better in the long run because you protect the integrity of all your work.
And again, I mean, you have a superintendent and a central office staff that know these things and are helping you put your agenda to, so it's not so pressing for you. There are times where I'm doing this presentation with brand new people where everyone's brand new. And so everyone's learning together. I just want to give you sort of the basics, and we have good publications and a great book on this stuff, and you can always call me. So we discussed this, you know, appointment, employment, performance, any of these things, and you're going to just grab it on your agenda a little bit more specifically than that. You don't have to name the individual. The key here is that you have to give the person 24 hours notice to request that that session be in public session if they would like. Very rarely happens, once in a while, very rarely, but you have to give them that opportunity. It has to be that same notification like at the time of 24 hours. Security and safety. And again, there are only 5 statutory legal reasons to go into executive session. And there are all kinds of different ways that this could be on a plan around your school about coming up with new security measures. There are a number of things that could fall into this category, but especially since, and we know you have to balance, you know, parents want to understand how their kids are going to be safe and all that, but you have to balance that so that people you don't want to get that information can't get that information either. So certainly you're allowed. Pending claims and litigation, so anything where it doesn't have to be that the suit was filed, but it has to be something that is pending, someone that is threatening to sue, a matter that has some kind of legal importance that could put you on the defensive in some way or another. Real estate transactions, very rarely in this position, but sometimes you are, leasing, purchasing, selling, where it could affect your ability to negotiate. So this is the catch-all, the confidential documents and information. This mostly pertains to what we call FERPA, which covers student educational records, which are in a giant category. And there might be some other exceptions there too, but this is where it's sort of the bigger catch-all that the statute allows. Other reasons for executive session? Nope. Okay, so non-meetings.
Would you want to talk just for a second about what in executive session do's and don'ts? I mean, you know, the biggest one that we usually hear is somebody violated confidentiality, that they went out and shared something. The reason you go into executive session is to protect the records. And again, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you know, some of this I feel like you may be new, but some of these things are, you have experienced board members and experienced superintendent, and, you know, common sense in some of these areas will weigh out. But certainly confidentiality is big in any situation. We do, and it also is a trust issue for all of you. It can be tough. I mean, things are going on and your husband wants to know, and you know, we all make those decisions, but really, that's why you're allowed to go in, is because there's a specific exception. So we want you to be able to have that discussion. As soon as somebody else has knowledge about that, then it legally in some ways has disrupted the privilege. And so we want you to be able to keep that privilege where you have it, to be able to do what you need to do. So just, so keep, what happens in executive session stays in executive session.
Yeah, but there is nothing worse than reading in the local newspaper the next day what happened in executive session and starting to think who talked, you know, and talk about a way of violating trust and losing the trust of your colleagues. That's one way. And unlike some FOIs, some states that have laws like this where you can be legally penalized, in Connecticut it's kind of more not.
No, I mean, and the FOI police aren't gonna come flying, you know, with the things blazing and all of that. But it's important for you. They've given you these 5 very limited exceptions, and when you need to take advantage of them, you do.
Yeah.
to discussions of strategy or negotiation for collective bargaining. I think, I mentioned this one mainly because these are non-meetings. They're non-meetings for a very good purpose. I mean, you've got to come up with times and places to meet with folks. And it may be, okay, we can get this afternoon, but we couldn't, having to notice and go through all of those things. There are states this isn't true, but that could really disrupt your ability to conduct negotiations, and you want to get through those in as positive and effective a way as possible. So those are non-meetings. Now, some boards go into executive session to do certain things around that, and I generally say to them, as an attorney, I don't want you to do that because it's not one of the legal reasons for going into executive session. I'd rather just you do what you need to do because it's not actually a reason. But again, I'm not gonna, if people are doing things and it's working for them and they're not in trouble, you do business how you do it. That's what I would suggest. These are non-meetings. The search committee, the important thing about that is that you have to be named your bargaining team. So if you've made the whole board your bargaining team, then it's a non-meeting with your whole board. If you have a smaller bargaining team, then that too is a non-meeting. If it's going to be discussed generally, you may be in a position where you're having executive session, but for that bargaining committee, you are in non-meetings. And that is the same thing for a search committee for an executive level candidate, which is anybody above the level of assistant principal. So once you've named that committee, then that committee can meet in non-meetings. I have a situation right now where they were talking about who to have on it and thought that their next meeting was a non-meeting. I was like, well, you don't have a committee yet. So you need a committee before you can have a non-meeting. A caucus of a single political party, regardless of whether there's a quorum or not. Communication limited to notice and agenda are non-meetings as well. Chance social meetings or even planned social meetings. I can't tell you, this has been an interesting election year, how many calls I had around the holidays, can we do this? Well, yeah, we want you to do that. We want you to get together socially and not for the purpose of business and not talking business, so you can get to know one another and build relationships with one another. You can do that.
Becca, I just want to check in with Ashley. How are we doing on time? Because I know you have a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, no, I
wanna make
definitely
sure.
want to try to
Okay, well, this
speed it along.
stuff, compliance with requests.
Sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we let our students go if they need to? Because I
Oh,
don't know
absolutely.
if you guys need to go, I know that finals and stuff, so.
I'm good for
that.
Take us behind the
Alright, so, the last point I want to make in this area is a tool provided point as well as some new information from what we have been saying for a while, the First Amendment issues and public comment at meetings. So in the past, what we used to say was, and boards vary widely about how they do this. Some limit public comment to a time period, and we recommend that so that you can do business and then to open it up in larger forms. Some require that it be limited to the agenda, and some have no restrictions at all. You have to allow people to speak. It has to be, your restrictions have to be content neutral. So time, limitations and that sort of thing we're limiting to the agenda are okay. We used to say, and lots of policies say, these are good examples of how you can restrict them. Published agenda, individual time in general, you can have a time period on your agenda. Having it on some meetings and not in others, all of those things are okay. But singling out speech, even harmful speech, for restriction is not allowed. We now have several federal court cases and one pending U.S. Supreme Court case that say even when you are trying to do the right thing, and we used to say it very differently, when someone gets up to talk about a student or starts to say something really negative about a staff member or a board member, but often you're looking to protect your staff, to protect those students, the courts have spoken very loudly that while that is a noble thought, unless you have restricted your speech to or your comment to the agenda items and it's on a non-agenda item, you have to allow folks to have that time to say what it is they're going to say. The example was in a case where a chair knew very well that someone was going to get up and say something incredibly horrible, and happen to be untrue but horrible things about staff, if you're gonna allow them to say good things about staff, like unlimited, not just to the agenda, you have to let them to say other things. So what the courts were essentially saying is, as bad as that is, it's not your responsibility to enforce the slander and libel laws. So that's another reason why we encourage you to have sort of a statement on your agenda that says, we encourage you to go through the chain of command. If you have a complaint, we'd like to refer it to that chain of command, so that folks know that they have a place to go. In that particular case, the chairman stopped the meeting and the person was not allowed to speak, and the court said, I'm sorry, you had to allow her to say those things because it was an open public forum. There were no restrictions on it in terms of being restricted to the agenda or anything else. Now, I know that is a terrible double-edged sword because you want to hear your community. So if you restrict things to the agenda, then people are going to feel like we can't. It's a balancing act. It really is, because you can't protect, you can say also, as in, Nick had an example where a person started talking about special ed student and other students and all, and the chair said, I'd just like to stop you and have you think for a moment, you know, that we shouldn't be hearing these things and other people shouldn't be hearing these things. We'd really like you to go speak to so-and-so about that, and they'll be available for you now, but that person chose to keep speaking anyway. You do what you can, but you have to let them talk, depending on what your restrictions are. That's very different than what we used to tell.
I'm just curious, because we have a policy, you know, no boisterous conduct or profane language will be permitted.
That's okay. If people are disruptive and using profanity in a way that, you know, it's about saying this person did this or this person did that, as opposed to expletive, you know, that sort of thing that would be offensive and is inappropriate for the group and for children and for everyone else that are allowed to be here. And in that case, as the chair, if you can't stop, you can stop that and you can take a recess or do what you need to do. So we have language for you. There is a lot of policy floating around out there that says this, which is nice. No oral presentation shall include charges or complaints against any employee of the board or a board member or about students, or the chair shall refer those persons to the chain of command. So the previous policy says, this is what we would like you to do. We may refer you, we would like you to do these things. But it doesn't say you cannot do that. So we've done a lot of policy work around that, and are recommending agenda-specific public comment. And then when you hear something from a lot of people that needs to come up, to either have it on the agenda, not that type of thing, or to have some other meeting around it. So you're addressing everyone's concerns, but you're not opening yourselves up and other people up to that potential problem. It also, there are some boards that does say, you know, you are free to speak, you're not free from the consequences of your speech. We are going to allow you under the law, and there may be consequences for that. And again, that's a harsh way of saying that, but it is the court saying it's not your responsibility to enforce those laws, nor can you. That may just be the consequences. So that is the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We threw a lot at you tonight, I hope.
Yeah, and I didn't tell any fun stories because I didn't want to take up time, but someday maybe we'll get a chance.
Let's just do a couple of quick questions if anyone has any.
You got a lot of business to do.
We do, because I know they don't have anything pressing that they wanted to ask. So
You know where to find
thank you very
us.
much for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Take care.
Let's get your contract back.
All right.
So let's jump right into the budget.
I shouldn't pull that out.
It's okay. I've got it everywhere.
So agenda item G2 is the budget. So at this point, this is on the agenda, so the board of education can continue its discussion with respect to the superintendent's proposed budget that ultimately becomes the Board of Ed budget. Between now and February 12th, there are two meetings. There's the meeting on the 28th, and then there's the meeting February 12th itself. And so the board has the obligation and responsibility of deliberating about what it wants to do for the budget, and ultimately asking to make the changes that I eventually propose to the board on the 12th as the board's budget for them to vote on. And then on the 13th, it's brought to the town manager to be brought to consideration of the town council. So at this point, We don't have any additional meetings. The board may want to consider one for February, the early first week if it wants to, but it may not need to do that. And the conversation, just continues tonight, what you'd like to do. Excuse me.
We have to have any questions?
So over the past couple weeks, I'll just give an update for everyone, because we got quite a few emails, and I'd just like to kind of state where I am with all this. I, along with other board members, have been doing quite a bit of research and looking through this budget and asking questions. Currently, I feel like there's definitely room for improvement in this budget. As many people mentioned, there are several cuts to programs that I think are harmful, and at the same time, if adopted, it would be one of the larger increases that we've had in the past 3 years. I don't think that's a very good combination for our students or our taxpayers in town. However, I think that, to Dr. Wilt's credit, was working with us, and I feel like we can probably come up with a good budget that can be more efficient. Hopefully try to put some of those things back in. This is very tentative, but I feel confident about that.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah.
Anyone else to add? I know how are the questions coming in through the Google Forms? What's the level?
A number of questions.
Not just from us, but like.
Working through them. And as I said, that over the next week or so, you'll see many being posted. The board has already seen some posted. It's usually what I do is I get to the board ones directly, because you need to be making decisions about the things. So your questions I will usually devote most of the energy to, and then I start to trickle those into the ones that are on the public side, which some overlap, so it does allow for some of that. So in the coming week, people will see the public budget, one start to be propagated, and yours, which is also generally public through all your discussions, that's going to be even more populated as we go over the weekend and into the next week. So, and you're seeing that now, you're starting to see.
So, I'd like to actually just counter what Jacob's saying. We have 1.87% ask, last year 0.84%. Year before that was 0.72, I believe, and the year before that was 0. Previous to that, we had them in the range of about 2.5% for a 5-year overall of 1.63%. I would say that it's not a larger increase, but we have to be worried about making sure that our budget, that our spending plan, to use Nick's term, is in line with what the district needs. So I would ask Dr. Willett if he could speak to the contractual obligations that we don't have any say over, like at this point, because we've already made our obligations to the folks that work for us as a town, and how much that increase, affects our overall line. And then that's one question. Contractual obligations increases. And my second question really has to do with which ones of the lines are really like outside of the control of Dr. Willett and us. Like there are some numbers, if I'm understanding things properly, that are given to us and we have zero say over what that number is. So I think that would be helpful. And I don't know, I just think that it would be helpful for us to all know where we are in those two things.
So, usually the big drivers will be insurance, contractual obligations, as you said, transportation, special education. You do and you don't have control over some things like special education. Obviously, districts can take proactive measures to make sure that they can provide services in district and make sure that they have programs in place to to minimize those kinds of outplacements because the kids have excellent opportunities within districts. So literacy programs, structured literacy, things like that will help help the district be able to serve kids that may be struggling with all kinds of things, dyslexia, stuff like that. That if they don't do, then it ends up being a situation where they'll outplace. So to that extent, you can have some influence over special education costs because you're making sure that you're appropriately addressing kids' needs so that people can't make claims in hearings that that's not happening. So that can be done. Transportation, we went through a process with that is what it is, but generally those costs tend to creep up because, and right now, that tends to be because of drivers and unionization of drivers, asking for the benefits that the bargaining units obviously feel strongly about. And so they have to contend with that, and usually will pass that on to us. Insurance is what insurance is. Lockton gives us, and they're a consulting firm, will give us the recommendation to keep us, in an appropriate level of funding, and we've done that, and we're following it. We do have a meeting with them. Actually, next week we're trying to put one together to follow up with them, because we have a few questions, but at this point, we have it, and that's where we're at. And obviously contractual increases. That is a driver, and you'll notice that the salaries line is actually down a bit because we've taken chunks as everywhere we could. The 187 budget is literally the best I could do for the town with respect to trying to get it in the best place possible. As I said, I think it is a good budget that is that it has definite sacrifices that I understand people aren't comfortable with, and I respect that. There's no way to get to a place where everybody's going to be happy with it, but I don't want it to be lower than 187. I think that would be a major problem for your town if it's lower than 187. It's my job to advocate, that's what I'm doing. It would be a mistake in my mind to bring it lower for a variety of reasons that we can go into. So right now, for wages for TEA or teachers, there was an 8.69 total increase over 3 years. Something to keep in mind is I just checked the recent settlements, and that settlement, just so you know, and talking about that, the settlement is the 59th lowest of 71 settlements, which means 83 settlements received a higher percentage. 83%. 59 to 71. So you can try to say, the teachers you're doing pretty well here. You're as a district, teachers are fairly compensated, but 83% of the settlements at this moment in time are higher.
Does that mean they're getting higher than 3% every year?
They're getting a higher percentage over 3 years than the teachers in Tolland are.
So they're averaging over 3% every year.
Well, right now, I could go into detail, but 8.69 is what our teachers got. That means they got more.
So they could have gotten like 8.7 or 8.8. Are we talking like how many? I guess would be like over 10.
Off the top of my head, over 10. I don't know, but I definitely could.
I'm just more curious. Like, are we around the 8.69, or are we significantly?
Yeah, I can provide that, but you're definitely, if you think about it, 59 of 71. To make the point that teachers are not overcompensated, they're actually in this contract, they got a modest settlement, which is 59 to 71, if you're talking 70s or 7.78, 0.79, whatever to 9, it's still making the point that you're not getting gypped in Tolland. And if you take a look at even where that is, and I'm just in the process of answering all the questions, but even in an area where most teachers are, which is MA Min, MA Max, there's 155 teachers in that area, 81% receive a higher settlement for MA Min. And for MA Max, 54% receive a higher settlement.
MA Min is Master's of Arts.
Yeah, so if you're on step 1 MA, the way they do it is step 1 MA, it's just at a high step.
Yeah.
So even at your worst place here, if you want to consider it, worse, 54% are making more. So, that's what you have to look at is your negotiating team did a great job. And the numbers that I put out are going to show that, and I'm going to show you in a series of numbers how that's the case. So you're getting a decent deal. You should think about where your per pupil expenditure is, 130 out of 169, you're in the bottom quartile for what you spend, as far as the state's concerned on per pupil expenditure. It's in every, I can go through stat after stat if we want, and you're getting a good deal. In terms of where you're finding things, the big chunks are now in the programs that are preventing great things for your kids. If you care about your school system, structured literacy should stay. Literacy how? Structured literacy, it's 144,000, it's a big chunk. One outplacement for one child, 67, 70, plus some transport, 80, 2 children, 160 probably, and that's being conservative. That's more than the cost of that program for 2 outplacements, and that program helps you avoid that. The thing is, you're getting a really good deal with this budget, and I can argue point for point, data point for data point that that's the case. Residents should care about this. Be very careful of what you're seeing out there, social media and otherwise. Be very careful. You're in a perilous place. You've had 0.54 over 3 years, 1.43, I think, over 5, and 1.63 over 7. That's below general, that's CPI is higher than that in most of those cases. You're not in a place where this is an exorbitant or a crazy thing to be asking for. It's a modest budget, it's asking for what's needed. You're losing sports stuff, you're losing some tech and art electives, you're losing some things that that I felt like, they're not great to lose at all. They're not great. But, if we had to make, if there's concessions to be made, that's where they are. So it's not without sacrifice here.
Tony has a question.
Did you finish?
We had 2, right?
Well, and
Well, it's just which numbers are out of our control and what's a contractual.
yeah, I mean, your contractual things are the increases. Your energy is
Energy's out of our control.
It's to the extent that anyone can control energy. It is what it is.
We don't get to determine the number though, is what I.
Right, I mean, you make a projection and you do have debt service for the geothermals. And those are the things that, it's a 20-year loan and you're in on that. Insurance, got to kind of go with what the trend is.
So in the line items, you're looking at the hundreds and the 200s? I'm looking at the
Are you talking objects?
category-wise.
As far as out of our control.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the superintendent's proposed budget, because
Sure, I'm sorry.
there's a
Yes.
disaggregated, those are aggregated lines, but yeah.
And those are in the category classes, right?
Yeah,
So-
certified, the salaries, which are going to be subject to increases. You have some minimal wage impacts for the paraprofessionals. You've got, custodians go, the years as they go on, there's usually an increase contractually. But when you scour through this, you're going to find that the decision's pretty hard. Is it going to be literacy how? Is it going to be another stat? If you're going to bring it lower, you're going to bring it lower at the compromise of something, and that something will be the thing that I can go into great detail as we go through these communities.
Can I just ask quickly, where's literacy how this year? If it's 144 and another 144, where is it in the budget for 1920?
It was one of the, I think, and I have to go back and look, but I think it was one of the expenditures we make, because we have end-of-year funds at one point.
So it actually was from 1819's
So it was
budget.
probably, I have to look, but I know that we spent the money on the Literacy Hub program to get it embedded as structured literacy, so I'd have to go back and look at exactly when I did that. But remember, we didn't do it, what we aren't doing next year that we wanted to is we were going to expand it to the English and general ed population.
Oh, so literacy how then has not actually expanded to general population yet. We want it to, but it actually isn't there
To the
just yet.
extent that it's special education and SRBRTI groups, that's pretty much, we would want to, this is the 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing. We've made 1 step forward with this. It would be nice to make 2 steps forward and expand it. I took the expansion of it out of the budget. To get down
So
to
it wasn't
1.87.
expanded though in the past, because the expansion was new.
The expansion part is what I wanted to do, it didn't, and that was what was asked. And our ELA supervisor said, we really have to bring this here, and I said, it just can't happen this year. There was a lot of no's. In this budget, when I sat down with the admin, and when you're in the community budget workshop, if you ask them, there was a lot of no's. There was a lot of no's from me about what, what they wanted, what they needed, and I said no to. And that's, that the due diligence on this has been done. It may take me a while to get to every single, one of these questions per se, but I'm confident that that will be shown as we go along.
Dr. Willett gave you the intro right there, is perfect. We have the board questions, which I'm seeing start to appear on the spreadsheet in there, but we've also got, based on what I'm seeing in the email traffic, we've got a significant number of questions coming from the general public that are leading towards the individual line items and the analysis that was put together to come up with the 1.87 to identify, is this a responsible budget or not? Now, I recognize that you're doing your due diligence and you're putting together this narrative and answering these questions as we can. But at some point, we're gonna have to take the answers to these questions, bring them back in front of the board, discuss, and make that analysis. And if I'm looking at now, we're on the 12th of February, we're supposed to vote on whether or not we approve this budget, which essentially takes that meeting out of the discussion. So we've got, pardon?
You have as many hours in that particular meeting as you want, but yes, when you get to that point, you want to have a general sense. That's why I was thinking you might want to add a meeting.
There's my problem. How do we, if we don't have all the answers to the questions now, we can't reasonably expect that it's gonna happen in the next few days, which means the amount of time that we have to have any decision and change anything, if that's what's determined, becomes incredibly short.
See, as long as there isn't a constant, you pretty much put in a number of questions, and I think the people that have not gotten to a equilibrium on their questions. So if we have most of the questions now, we can probably get most of those questions done by the beginning. If we get as many questions as we have now coming in, in a constant flow, I can't tell you that I would get to every single one. I can tell you that I think what we've got for board questions, I can get to by the beginning of February at nuts. But if I had the same number hit me right at that, it's all about what we can do. One sentence with 5 words in it, could require 3 paragraphs of an answer. So it's just, by February 1st, I think we should be able to get most of the board's questions handled, so long as there isn't, an inundation of them. Plus, a lot of the public ones too.
And I think we've got,
and I'm on the
Chair, I
way.
think we've got to figure out 2 things. One, I do believe that we're gonna end up having to have another meeting. We're gonna have to discuss and figure that out. But 2, I think if it looks like the amount of questions are starting to reach that number where some of them are not gonna get answered, then somehow there has to be a process. I don't know if it's the FFC committee or if it's the chair. Somehow we've got to figure out a process and determine which ones is not gonna get the attention to it.
Or at that moment in time, FFC or somebody can even say, put your energy into these, these 5 or these 3. At that point in February, it might be a good point, a good place to sort of make that call, and maybe that we get through all of them.
They don't want to end up on the 12th having to vote on a budget that we haven't fully investigated. And having to vote yea or nay based on a deadline rather than on a deadline.
And I think it makes sense to have a point at which questions that have been submitted are questions. Because the thing I can say is I can cut through the ones that we have, but if I get inundated with more at a certain point in time, that would be very difficult to execute. We would need to pick. But I think that what's happening now is there's a lot of overlapping. So I think what's going to happen is, when we answer these 3 from the board, those 4 from the public ones will also be similarly answered. So we can just cut and paste. That kind of thing. But the board ones get priority. That's why the board ones get priority, because the board has to make the decision.
And I totally understand. I'm looking at some of these questions that we're asking the email traffic, and they're pretty good ones. And if we feel like we're only going to get enough time for board questions, then maybe some of these need to be resubmitted as board questions.
Yeah, we can do that, right?
Yeah,
We do.
yeah. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I think you're going to get most of these answered. It's just, I think what we're seeing is a trickling off of them, which means I think we're in a place where probably by February 1st we get most of them. But you know, again, that statement has to be asterisked with the 180 questions come in on February 11th or 10th. We have, you know, we definitely have a lot of people asking.
Which is great.
And some of them are, you know, actually, you know, just kind of a quick one here and a quick one there. So what might happen is by answering a larger question, 10 of them might get answered because they're all about a similar thing.
And I think some of the ones, you know, there's a question on that item X or that item Y, I think are actually gonna end up spawning additional questions. As we get further into the analysis of why numbers are put in certain conditions or where the resources had to be reallocated, I think other questions will come from. Like I said, we have an incredibly short amount of time in how we do that.
And that's what I'm starting to wonder too now, if we're looking at our schedule. That we have, you know, you're saying February 1st for most of the response. I mean, I can't really continue asking questions until I get answers as to then go from that point.
Well, I would recommend
So,
adding. I would recommend adding one that, which we've talked about. I would recommend adding.
and what date would that fall?
Well, I think, I actually made a recommendation here in my item G2. I make the recommendation of February 6th, because I think you're gonna need it. So an additional meeting could be scheduled or considered for February 6th. And again, I would expect the 28th to be a long meeting, I would expect the 6th
But I
to
feel
be-
like the 28th, you may not have that many answers if you're saying February 1st.
Well, no, we'll have a number of answers, it's just, you know, there's quite a few on both sides, so I'm just giving that kind of, 28th, we'll see, you know, the answers will cascade in. But by February 1st, I think, provided I don't get 180 more, or whatever, I think we're gonna be, we'll have most.
I just have a quick comment about scheduling the next meeting. I would agree that we probably should add another one because if we do decide to make any changes down the road, it's and the central office needs to prepare new budget books and change things if we have to. So they need the time on their end to be able to make that happen.
And you can have special, after February 6th, if you still don't think you are where you are, and you just told it, you're just gonna have to do a special session, which can be done in 24 hours.
Yeah, I'd agree that I think a meeting on the 6th or sometime after the 28th would be a good idea.
I like the idea of the 6th. How's everyone else feeling toward it?
We have to do for our kids.
Perfect. And then we can add that in for a board action to add if we need to, correct?
Yes.
Do you need a motion now?
I would need a motion to move it to board action and
Action,
then.
and then you can do it, it should be.
I move that we add, or what do I say, add a meeting on the February 6th, to action?
Have a special meeting,
Okay.
February
Special
1st.
meeting.
Yes.
Board action.
Under King and Butch. I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're good to go, so we'll move that to board action.
Could I ask you to kind of talk about the cut of the special ed case worker, case manager? You're called a couple different things, so like I think it would be helpful for us to understand. The reason I'm asking is when I've talked to Patty, she's concerned about it, and Patty is our pupil services director. Is that her title? Okay, I just want to check,
You
because they're
could-
different.
You could reverse it any which way.
Oh, okay.
She's the czar of special ed.
Okay, so talking to the czar, she was very concerned about the loss of a special ed caseworker. I think that's how it's written in the budget. So if you could talk about the impact of that a little bit, so we could understand their cut.
Yeah, you know, if I had the option of putting it back, that would be the first one that comes back. You know, when I look at the budget overall, there is no single decision I can make that people will sit back and say, boy, that was great, we'd love to lose that. I analyzed, like I said, all the programs, and I try not to make an impact on a program such that it would cripple the entire program. For instance, if you take athletics, as unpopular as that is, those 3 freshman teams, there's opportunities to play on JV, there's rec, there's diamond, there's a lot of other options, and in Tolland, there's a lot of other options. I make that decision with a heavy heart because my kids have been in sports, and I understand that getting a chance to play in high school, and you may not get that chance again in certain sports. And I get it. It's just no matter what I choose, it's going to raise the ire of some population, and I respect that. Special ed, what does it do? Puts us in jeopardy of maintenance of effort. Gonna have to split caseloads differently. That'll make some people unhappy. I think we can manage it. I think that there's some operational changes we can make to do so between the high school and the middle school, and that's why I made that choice. Somebody can do the backseat quarterbacking on it, and I understand that. It's just, so would it rather be a math teacher? Or, no matter where we go, that's not gonna be an impact that people would wanna see. And so it's definitely something that I think we can manage, but it's not something that is without its risk. Every position that I would put on the block has its risk.
I was just saying, and follow up to Kate's question about the impact, and this was a question I had sent in that's not answered yet, all the cuts that have been made, what, if we were to add the special ed teacher back in, or find an efficiency somewhere, what is the exact cost that we would add to the budget?
52,000.
52,000.
Right.
But what about benefits and?
Well, we calculate that differently because they don't always take benefits. So you don't always have to work necessarily where, but you're looking at 52 as an MA4, and it could be 10 or 15 in another direction for benefits.
So just to be clear, it's not a special ed teacher, it's a caseworker.
Special education, TEA
I
status,
mean,
what
I'm
it's
hearing
called in the
people say
sheet.
2 positions and it's being
A
called
special
different things, so-
educator is a person responsible for, typically, to use a general term, they have a caseload. And they are working with students, and they can work with those students cross-grade, or in a variety of environments within a school. And that caseload would be the kids they're working directly with and manage the IEP school. So a special educator or special education teacher will typically have a caseload of children they're working with, so they're also known as a case manager, or there's a number of different ways to refer. In my mind, I think of them as a special ed teacher / case manager.
I heard someone else speaking and it sounded, I think they thought it was 2 people, or at least my interpretation was they thought it was 2 people. So I think we should be made clear about what this is.
Sure. In my budget, that is a special education, it's one special education.
Yeah, so
I
the
think
teacher
what was
case
being-
manager, it's the same thing.
I think what was being said was that one person, the loss of that person meant someone else is gonna have to split between 2 schools. That kind of,
There are ways to
there's
logistically
different
manage
ways to
it,
make it happen,
and believe me, it's gonna
but
make
it's
some
not
people,
gonna be pretty.
make some people unhappy, because there is no, you don't make reductions without people being unhappy about it to some extent.
Can I just ask, on the salary sheet, so this is a TEA sped, it's one of those positions that we're talking about, okay.
Yeah, and we already took out differential between the MA4 and the retiree, for instance. So that would.
But on this sheet that you gave us, we didn't take anybody out yet, right?
Well, those are projections moving every position over a year.
Okay.
Yeah, but to give you if we have a retirement as a special educator and that person's rehired and we have an MA4 rehire, meaning we account for 52. The difference is what helps us get to the 1.87. Part of that helps us get to
Do you know of any retirements then within this that would help? Has that been adjusted?
It's already been adjusted.
That
That's part of your
already
187.
Okay.
Yeah, we took everything we could to get to as low as where we could go.
Okay.
And then MA4 is master's level 4, which is a pretty common thing, for hiring. Most people in education have a master's. You're required to have it after a while, so MA4 is pretty. MA8, is probably even range, but MA4 is what we're doing.
So, Dr. Willett, when,
Sorry, Tony, it's almost 10. Do we need to do a motion?
Yes. We will have to do that. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to go past 10.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. We will go past 10.
okay, sorry. So Dr. Willett, when you were doing your analysis and determined that I don't know how you put it, but that these three positions, the reduction of these three positions, was the best way of minimizing impact, you took into account what would be required to adjust that workload?
Yes, but, certainly, oh, absolutely, yes, but
So when
people will take on more work because of it.
Absolutely, but during that process, though, I'm assuming you had conversations with your staff and stuff, that the adjustment of the workload, if these were the three positions that were reduced, is not only doable, but doable in such a way that it minimizes the effect of the student.
Yes, it's doable, but when I had the curriculum director in district, if someone said, let's reduce the curriculum director, I would say, it's doable. But it puts a lot more stress on me. Reducing any positions puts stress on me. Can I do this? I'm doing it, but it does, so I'm not gonna pretend that I would say, let's say I took and reduced a math teacher. It would be doable, but the math teachers would probably feel like that wasn't a good thing. I can respect any professional group that when their area is reduced, they're gonna feel the weight of that. And that's no different. It makes sense. Can we execute this? Yeah, we can put it there if we couldn't. Do I expect everyone to feel like that, in any area where that would impact, would feel like that was great? No, I don't think that. And I'm giving you the most frank answer. I would think there are people unhappy with me about that.
But in your recommended budget, these are the positions that you feel would have the least impact.
Well, yes, understanding that I am not a special education teacher, so they're going to feel that in a way that I'm not. But having said that, when I look through the budget and I look at where we're at, yes, I think that is why they are in the superintendent's proposed budget.
But you consulted your special education experts before you made the decision on that.
Of course, I consulted the administrators, I didn't talk to every single special educator, but I've been involved in looking at that for a long time between the middle school and the high school. Does everybody agree with me? No, but that's the position I'm in, right? As superintendent, people will disagree and some will agree, and often what I'll say is then, well, what would you propose? And, typically people don't have something to propose. You know what I mean? This is my job. My job is to determine where we're at and how to do this. It's going to upset people. And yes, I considered that. And, no matter where we go with it, we can make an adjustment anywhere, but people will be unhappy with the adjustment wherever we make it.
And kids could lose out.
Kids, you reduce a position, something's not there anymore, and with special education though, I understand this, I can understand the feelings around it, and if we were going to put something back in the order of what to take back, that would be it. But I put it in there for reasons, because I think there are ways we can reorganize and manage it. But I would expect some people to be unhappy with it, just like I expect people to be unhappy with fifth grade or any of the other things that we do.
Well, and to kind of piggyback what Tony said and to what you were saying is doing things that are doable. Sorry. Like what concerns me, and thank you for the budget presentation and the round robin that we have with the administrators, and I really am appreciative of their time. It was quite educational. It concerns me with the fifth grade situation that's happening, because the way that fifth grade is set up is my understanding that teachers work in tandem to prepare these young students for the next level up going into that middle school and such. So although having 5 classes is doable, my concern is that the one student, well, not my one concern, is there's multiple concerns with it, but you're gonna have some students that are gonna be able to go with the ebbs and flows of the ever-changing environment of not having that partner teacher. You're gonna have other students that rely and need that consistency, knowing every day this is where they're gonna be And it's concerning that if they don't have that partnership, that 222 or whatever it might be, that we're gonna lose some children in that shuffle and not prepare them properly going on the next level. But again, using the words doable, of course it's doable. And as administrator or management, there's things sometimes you have to cut. We wanna cut them and no, we don't wanna cut them. But that's really very concerning, although it's possible. It's probably not the most opportune situation. So that would be something, just like the caseworker, what does the 5th grade teacher look like cost-wise?
All of that will be 52. Yeah, because
52.
we took out every differential.
Got it.
So that's the cost of any of that.
I did
At this
want-
point, that's what you say or don't say.
Okay, I did want you to talk about the enrollment sheet that you
Can I actually, I
started.
still have another question about the special ed.
1 minute, because I just wanted to talk about the enrollment sheet that you had prepared a little bit here to talk about how it's going to be probably structured in terms of the class sizes and what's gonna happen with that, since you had asked. And this is I really wanted to get this enrollment sheet out there to everyone so that we can actually have that discussion as to where enrollment is, because the 5th grade versus the 4th grade, it's 50, pretty close to 60 students less going into with your daughter's classroom from 4th into 5th. So the class sizes will not be changing, essentially, is what's happening, correct, from what I'm looking at?
Yeah, and if you think about where we are, the projection from now, which is 2354 as a general population number, to 2286, that each year we take the NESDEC number, but we have never, in the last couple of years, NESDEC tends to over-project, say we're gonna lose more than we lose. We usually lose less than that. And in Tolland, you're kind of going towards an equilibrium. You're getting to a certain place of equilibrium, and then the pre-K to 2, your enrollment is starting to creep up. So you're never gonna be I think, at least for many, many, many years, you're never gonna be as high as you were a few years ago, but you're not gonna be dropping below a certain threshold. You're never gonna be one of those tiny districts. So you're gonna reach this kind of threshold probably in the zone of the 24 to 28. But having said that, this particular budget has 2 teachers coming out of 5th grade. One is moved to 4th grade to offset numbers in 4th grade, one is reduced. So that's the move in 5th grade, is I take 2 from 5th grade, one goes to 4th, one is reduced.
So the teams will stay even.
Yeah, and they have not many years of experience with how to sort of manage some of these things, and I'm not saying it's easy, it's very hard, and I get it, and they're right. Everything I do causes frustration for someone, but again, this is, what we're kind of in a place of having to do.
I wouldn't say they're even though, it's not.
I mean, even
No,
as
but
far
they-
as, a lot of people I know expressed concerns about having a team of 3, that
Right.
was a big
It changes their
no-no.
rotation schedule.
Right,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
okay, so this
And
keeps
they
it
have
as 3 teams of 2.
And whatever Mr. Deneen comes up with, he could come up with a few different scenarios. I trust him, and he's an excellent principal, and they're an excellent staff, so I trust they can make the adjustment, understanding the situation. And I used to be the principal of a 5 through 8 school, and I understand how some of these things, transition. And sometimes you want your 5th grade schedule to have a little bit more similarity to a middle or high school one, because you want them to get used to that before they go. There's all kinds of talking points we could talk on this, and again, I'm not saying that to diminish the frustration around losing it, because people are frustrated, and I respect that. In Birch Grove, we're moving a teacher out of 2nd grade into 1st grade to offset numbers there. So your averages would be something like K18, 120, 222, I'm rounding here, 320, 421, and 524 on an average for next year as a projection. That's kind of where you're at K5, which I know is sort of where the main questions were coming. On enrollment, I provided a lot more information. I've tried to provide a tremendous amount of information for you so that when you pivot, the high school or pivot in different directions, you have information that you can consider with respect to some of that.
Is this gonna be for the public to view this, once you're?
Yeah, and I'm almost complete with it. I put the draft up for the Board of Ed because I wanted to get it to you within, have some time before you have the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
So I put up my draft, there's pieces I'm adding, yep, no problem. I'm adding pieces to this as we go along, so once I get the whole thing in its final form, I'll post it out. I'll put it on the budget page under one of the other documents. There's a few other documents I have to update. You know, in this, I am the person updating your website. So, you know, this isn't, so I gotta,
Yeah.
so
No, and
it's
thank you
gonna
for
take
that.
a little bit of time and I'll get them all.
I think
under.
this is important for everyone to have that baseline, just to see exactly where we're at and where everything's like lands. So thank you for getting that together. Let me just get to, because they,
special.
you also asked a lot of questions, so I wanna hear.
Oh, I didn't know that I got.
Well, I kinda wanna go through and hear everybody.
Okay, well, I have a serious
But-
question about the special ed teacher.
Well, I'm trying to, because Griffin didn't really get much, Jacob only had one turn, so I'm trying to get everybody.
I didn't go yet at all,
So
but I would like to hear Kate's question actually, 'cause
Go ahead.
That's just me shutting down.
It's
Okay, I'm
not
just letting you
shutting
know,
down.
you just shut me down, I'm just putting that out there, just putting it out there.
It's not shutting you down, Kate, it's just that there's
Okay,
a lot
let's
of
keep
people,
moving.
it's
Time.
fine, yeah.
Okay, I know we're gonna get into budget discussions about, give and take, the 28th meeting. Well, I was very happy with the fact that there is a teacher moving into first grade. When you said, that your first choice would be to add the special ed teacher back in, just from looking at this one, if I'm looking at the 131 in second grade, there's 145 coming back up the following year, so the class sizes. I feel like the fifth grade teacher is a valuable resource that could help alleviate that increase. That's just a small dip, so are we gonna have to hire somebody again
No, my
next year?
concern, the reason I do the sequence I did is maintenance of effort.
Okay,
But I think we can work with that, it's just, you take a measured risk no matter what.
okay.
In terms of this, I always think 3 to 5 years out, and I think I can make adjustments that will help the class sizes in that range of time. So, I think you're gonna be you're gonna be where you are a little bit better next year than you would have been, and in that subsequent year, you're right, you're going up by 4 kids. So it's not gonna shove that average too crazily. It's not great. Like I said, really, there's nothing, I'm not gonna argue for, hey, yeah, this is fantastic, we're reducing a fifth grade teacher. But again, when I had to look at everything, if I put on the block all sports, or if I put on the block, a math teacher at the high school, or if I put on, these things aren't gonna be received well either.
No, I know, and
So
but here's my thing. Looking at Literacy How, and I'm not here to attack Literacy How, I think it's a great program, I looked at the resources on their website, I looked at all the districts using them. It looks like they have a ton of valuable resources that don't involve the very expensive coaching. From what I can see, Tolland's the only district listed that's getting provided follow-up coaching as their clients. So for me, $144,000 for follow-up coaching, I would rather have the special ed teacher, the fifth grade teacher, and the tech ed teacher.
You will have outplacements. You will risk getting outplacements. You're not gonna have a structured literacy program that's gonna work, and you will outplace children for dyslexia. That is what will happen. That's why we're doing it. We're doing it because your district lacked a strong phonics program. We're taking care of it. If you knock off the things we're doing to take care of it, you'll have outplacements. That's what you're gonna have. One outplacement is 70,000, another, and that's not including transportation, that's your average. 6 kids get outplaced with dyslexia, you're looking at 80 times 6, or maybe 100 times 6, versus paying 144 for, Literacy How. Literacy How Inspire is your deal. Not only is it your deal, it's responsible for children, and there's a reason we're doing that in Tolland, and you're getting the benefits of it. Also foundations. If I thought that was something that could be sacrificed, I would have put it in a block, because I'm not eager to have people reduced. I mean, for me to put, positions on the block versus a program, that's not something I do easily. So, I'm telling you, if you take those kinds of things away, you are messing with the parts of the engine that make this thing move. Don't question, it's good to make lots of questions, but the professional opinions of the people that are working for you, we're doing this for a reason. And if I'm thinking, let's not expand it into the ELA general population, and let's take that one step forward and keep that thing going, if you take that away, you're making a decision based on an understanding of it that I understand why, but you're gonna cripple it, you're gonna cripple the effort.
Can
Go
I
ahead
just
and
ask
ask
a
Patty
question though?
Hess.
If you have that coaching, how long would it need to stay in place in order that the whole population would be able to get that from the coaches that teach our
Ideally, it would be cycling for a few years. Right now, we send people to Trumbull for the re-ups. When people come in new, we send them to Trumbull for the main training, and then they come back and then they work.
So is it like a 2-year process, like what's the?
If I had to project, I would be conservatively saying it would be a couple of year process. And then, then we would have some capacity. We still would have to onboard people through Trumbull or wherever, when new people came in, we'd have to onboard them by sending them to the initial training. But it's the programs that we have for this, there's a reason why I am not reducing them. And as a superintendent, I'm protecting you. That's what I'm trying to do, is give you children and give the district the best position it can be in. And if that's where we go, you'll have the short-term, elation of having some staff, which I wish I could have, but you're gonna have the long-term impact of not having that program, not having the ability in a hearing to say, yes, we are covering that base. And here's how we are covering that base. So there is no need to go outside for this because we have this here. So in that hearing, we're more apt to have them agree with us, and that's important for the child and for you.
Karen?
Oh, sure, I'll go. I just have a comment and then a couple questions about some different items. So it's Dr. Willett's job to send a positive message about the district, so I don't think we should hold that against him. He has to still open the doors in the fall for our schools, so regardless, that has to happen. Are our students going to feel the losses? Yes, I do believe they will, and our staff. I attended our local prevention council meeting recently, which is made up of different people in the community. What I heard at that meeting is the most important thing for kids and adults who are struggling is to have a connection, to have hope. So I see our role here, and I see a lot of this that we're talking about, most importantly as a loss of opportunity for students. But I also see it as a loss of adults in front of kids, as support, as a positive place to be, as that connection. So as we think about this budget, which is not a level services budget and not what I wanted, I think it's important to understand that perspective. I also don't think it's our place to say we don't need things like coaches, because that's up to the professionals in our schools and Dr. Willett. I would like to ask Dr. Willett, it's kind of a global question, but do you have everything you need as our superintendent for our students to succeed? And in our work towards things like Portrait of a Graduate in Tolland and towards student achievement, which is what I heard from Cave earlier, which is what really our focus should be, student achievement. And I would really like to hear, that, because it just, taking a step back feels to me like we're not setting our students up to succeed.
The budget that I proposed at 1.87, understanding the context of things is designed to give you, to maintain the district's offerings in a responsible way. Having said that, I could go on and on about things I feel like we need, and there was a question about what the 11 positions are, and I can put that out there, what the admin had asked for. I did not include that, small examples of we need probably a foreman. Peter Stava is our facilities director. He's running around being the director and repairing things on his own. He's totally doing an unbelievable job, but, having a foreman would make sense. You lose a lot of things, and if you lose him, you're losing much, much, much more than just an employee. You're losing an entire paradigm shift in how we do things. And I could say that about a lot of people. Everybody in the central office. Suzanne Waterhouse, an HR person who's, 414 people for one HR person. 414. For ACA, everything else she has to process, one.
Suzanne rocks.
Jen Palomo. I drive my secretary nuts doing all kinds of things all the time. She's doing amazing. They're all just working an amazing job, doing a lot of things. So there's lots of things I could ask for. I think from the standpoint that I'm at, I just want to keep reiterating, please don't go below the 187. And no matter where you go to get it, you're gonna, there's gonna be some significant sacrifice to do that. There's little things here and little things there, but this is a very responsible ask, and I'm hoping that we can go with that without sacrificing what we're doing.
No, I would defer to anybody else who has a question.
I'm good right now.
Okay. Because I have lots, so I could go on. So I know that I personally don't feel the 187 budget is where I'd like to see it to be. I personally would not like to see it go any lower either. We want to keep thriving and being competitive in the school. But I think a lot of the information that is out there needs to continue to be clarified via questions and submissions. So we're going to keep them coming. I think one of the questions that I've heard, and people have asked me directly outside of the world, is the travel and conferences, is the professional development, and in order to be accurate in saying this 187 is bare minimum, and if I were to be so bold as a board member to say that I would like it higher, I would like things clarified that may be misconstrued as misspending or misappropriating. So if you could kindly explain a little bit more about PD and kindly explain a little bit more about this Finland trip that not many people are aware of, that what the district is paying for or not paying for in this Finland trip, and how it impacts the 187 budget overall, please.
Sure. So there's administrators under 6C of their contract and fringe benefits get $1,100 towards some kind of educational experience for them. There's 2 administrators that have been involved with the Teacher Leadership Fellow Program, or Teacher Leader Fellowship Program. It's run by Betty Sternberg, who's a former Commissioner of Education in Connecticut. The two administrators have spent almost 2 years now in the program. And that program requires they do many, many hours beyond their workday. They go at night to the program. It's at Central Connecticut State University. And like I said, it's got 2 years of content, 2 years of things that they're doing. And Betty Sternberg runs an amazing program there. It's well known across the state. It's been around for 20, I think maybe 30 years. So the admin have been working in this program for about 2 years. And there's an extension of the program called the Global Experience. So these 2 administrators wanted to apply their $1,100 to the Global Experience, which was an educational experience. They're paying the majority of it themselves, but under Article 6C they can apply this fringe benefit towards something. That could be a administrator conference in Boston, it could be something like that. Some of the other PDs, like what's out other things, $595 per person for one thing. It's not, when we looked at that PD stuff in FFC, I think it was FFC, somewhere in there, you get to see a sense of, your average PDs or your average conferences are about $595 plus other things there. So, the $1,100 that they get under Article C, they can apply as a fringe towards something. they wanted to apply it towards that global experience. And frankly, you know, as in their union, you know, they can apply that $1,100 anywhere they want. So it's $1,100 per administrator, and these 2 administrators use their $1,100 towards that.
So to clarify, in this entire budget, it's $2,200 that is going towards Finland that would, if it wasn't going to Finland, it would go to some other professional development for
Yeah, it's
teacher.
a $40 million budget, it's
Administrator.
$1,100 under Article 60.
So Finland is not skewing any of the budget, $1,100 times 2 would already be in here no matter what it was used for.
No, yeah, and they could use it for Breakthrough Coach, which is a program in Boston, which is, you know, so it's allocated for they can apply it to an educational experience.
So it
This-
doesn't go toward the actual,
It's part of what's called the extension of the Teacher Leadership Fellowship Program has this global extension, and that's what they applied to.
but it doesn't actually, we like still pay for the cost of the actual program itself.
Well, TLFP is its own thing, so teachers go to that, admin go to that, yeah, that's its own thing.
So that's 900.
This is a global, this is the global
Per person.
opportunity.
900 per person.
Yeah.
So they're getting 900 plus 1,100, and that's in this budget, or that was last year's budget?
Well, in 2 years, it's an average of 295 per session that they go to, and they go to these sessions at night. And the Teacher Leadership Program, run by Betty Sternberg, the commissioner or former commissioner of education, it's a thing that admin do with teachers. So that part of that training piece, yeah, admin and teachers go to this training piece, very, very well-known one in the state. And this global experience is something that these 2 admin, you know, have decided they wanted to do, and under Article 6C applied their $1,100 to, and those are the only 2 that the district is doing that with because, you know, they have a fringe benefit that allows them to apply it in a direction. You know, so again, I mean, look, you have 0.54 budgets over 3 years, and a 1.43 over 5, and a 1.63 over 7, and you have your 130 out of 166 in pre-pupil expenditure, and your teachers are at 59 out of 71 settlements, and, you know, in terms of ranking, about 83 above that. So, I mean, you know, it's something they have in their contract. You know, if I say no, it can be challenged. It's just something that they apply to like they would apply to any other educational experience. It's a global experience, and they applied it to that. They're paying the great majority themselves, and they're bringing back training for the admin in the district for it. You know, it's what it is.
So the after part of it, I'm sorry to take people's time, but the after part of it would be the expectation where they would come in and coach and develop peers and.
Yeah, and they're willing to do, that's a big part of the entire program is coming back, coaching, developing. You know, and frankly, the program they're talking about and looking at has a lot of things that people in Tolland have expressed interest in. They have lots of recess structures over there that people have really expressed interest in here. Their collaborative model of education is one that is seen as a highly advanced, very desirable one, and then, you know, that's part of the study of it. It does not look like it looks like a lot of work, frankly. If you look at everything that they have to do, I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it personally. It's too much work, and they're willing to do it. And they're willing to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of their own money, far exceeding what we're spending. To you know, of their Article 6, out of their fringe allocation, they're spending far more of their own, you know, dollars on that.
So the other admins that are going, then they're not using their fringe for that?
There are no other admin going on that global experience.
Oh, okay.
It's
I thought
just
we
the
had a different
2,
list.
it's 2 admin that are going on the global experience, and that's Article 60, what you end up giving them is $1,100 per person for it.
I'm sorry, but the list you had given us before. Those
Yeah,
are
no,
not
I
the
mean,
people that
as
are
you look
going.
through
More people on it, I think it's
Yeah.
tapered down.
When you look through the entire list of PD, which the whole board has gotten, there's page after page of the individual programmatic stuff that people go to.
No, I'm talking about just that list you had given us specific to
Yeah, no,
Finland.
on the list, there's
It had 5 admins and 4
There's
teachers.
Teacher Leadership Fellowship Program, which
Okay,
is
so
not,
those are just
it's
the
not
people who are
Finland. Yeah, that's a
doing
different
the,
thing. Some teachers have decided to go on this,
Okay.
but they're doing it on their own.
Oh, okay, I think that's where I was confused.
And they
That
don't,
list
the
you had given us
differentiation is the
last
teachers don't have it in their contract. They don't have that article for that fringe. They have other things. They have certain course reimbursements and they have,
So I thought you had said that like some of the admins were gonna kind of donate their fringe, so that's not happening to the teachers.
no, I don't remember saying they would donate their fringe, but they could, I wouldn't let them donate their fringe. I would not let that happen, but I can see consternation,
And how much longer is that program happening?
Well, that program's been running for 30 years. We still may have people requesting to be in the program, just like they're requesting to be in the series of PDs we send people to. You got a report on that. There's a lot of different PDs from, going to VCon, to going to the NGSS conferences, Boston, and different places when they're in the area regionally and things that people do. So they're requesting that, and some more people might request to be part of the Teacher Leadership Fellowship.
I just had a clarification, so each of that yearly expense for that $990, it's a yearly expense? You just pay for
No,
that?
I mean, you commit to for their purposes, you're asking them to commit to a year of going to nighttime classes, and we would pay for that in advance because they're gonna want that, well, typically. But, again, if you break it down by seminar, it's probably in the range of the $260 to $290, which is generally what those kinds of seminar trainings are, anywhere you would send anybody. If you go look at it, it's one of the most credible, programs in the state. It's Betty Sternberg's amazing. She runs a great program. It's not, podunk or
1500 district.
yeah, or more. It's a consortium, and they share information. And these people come back and they do a lot of different work items in the district. And frankly, I have a family of 5, and I don't know that I could give that many evenings to this. These people drive to New Britain. Yeah, they drive to New Britain to do it on their own time in the evening. And,
So when were subs requested then? Are we paying for subs if they're going in the evening?
I don't know, not for when they're in the evening.
I think it was listed on
It
there.
was listed on the PD sheet.
It probably would be for, there's a conference during the day, there might be 1 or 2 that would be in a conference during the day. They may pay for subs if they're developing a programmatic thing, that we come out of class to develop a programmatic thing. So we give.
Over here, he's been.
So, I forget, when is this trip happening? Is it during the school year, or is it?
I think it would be the summer.
Okay. All right,
I think
just
I saw
curious.
something about April vacation.
Or April vacation,
Okay.
it's probably during one of the breaks, not entirely sure.
Okay, so you wouldn't have to have substitutes?
Not for
us.
admin.
Okay. All right, or for the teachers, if it's over break, I guess?
No break now.
Yeah, okay. I guess my other question is, Finland's system is very different from ours. So I'm just kind of curious as to how that could possibly transfer up into Connecticut with our.
Well, now you're talking a 3-hour conversation. So Finland is a very homogeneous population.
Yeah.
We're a very heterogeneous population. If I were going to say I had a problem with the analogy of US to Finland, I would say, their homogeneous population in their history doesn't have the same kind of equity issues in some ways that the United States has. So from the standpoint of equity and certain struggles, Finland and the United States are not great comparisons. However, from the standpoint of execution of our collaborative model of education, you can't get better than Finland. Like literally, they have the most advanced collaborative model, and it's far superior to what we have in many places in many ways. And some of the structures they have, we could adapt here, some of the preschool, some of the other structures, some of the stuff that people have been expressing. They've actually, in prior years, cited our.
He asked a question, I think we were.
So I'm just saying, on one side I can say homogeneous versus heterogeneous, that makes it a different thing, but that in their collaborative model, we should really be looking at that.
I would just add, just for some perspective there, that like the recess conversation, there's a parent group here in the community that organized around recess. I don't know if they're still active, but I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the younger grades,
Oh, I think recess is great for kids, but I
additional
think they
recess,
definitely
like
need it.
the Finland part
You
is
can't have them sitting.
part of it, and I know that there's parents in the community
it's-
that are concerned about that, and I think that that's what you're referring to, is people have
There's
reached out to
been
you.
many parents who've met with me on that
Yeah.
issue. So again, it's $1,100 per contract for these guys, can apply, and I pay them for themselves.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I did have another question about health insurance, and I know that you said that's kind of uncontrollable. And sometimes it does change down the road, but I know that at that point, we've already set our path, so there's kind of nothing you can do. Is there opportunity later if the consultant says the rate I gave you is going down or whatever? Is there opportunity there?
Catch-22 is you're setting, you've got a set budget. And you get,
Right, that's what I mean, our
definitely
budget is set.
you get more trend as the year goes on. You know, trend can work against you or for you. If in March or, you know, somewhere in there, you get a better trend number, how that applies, you know, you've already set it. So it's a situation that always has a catch-22 element. Having said that, we're trying to meet with Lockton next week. I would like to, I have a few questions for Lockton that, they're great, they're really great. But, you know, there's some questions I think would be reasonable to ask, and, you know, we're gonna meet with them and see. I hope and I wish I could bring you some kind of great news on that, not necessarily anticipating that frankly, but it's worth a meeting and we're gonna have one.
I'm sorry, can I just put one second? We had talked with FFC that we had over $2 million reserves, so I'm assuming that's something that you're gonna bring up to them to see, 'cause I think when we had last spoken, you thought that we might be able to lower the.
You're always optimistic when you begin a process, and then you have your financial consultant come in and just destroy your optimism. And you know, I think for me, it's just, what I'm saying to you with respect to your self-insured situation is you're doing well. It's a smart thing to do. Steve Warbner is a smart man. He started, with self-insuring years ago as part of a consortium called ECHIP. That consortium is being responsible. And, kudos to Steve Warbner. He guided your whole town into a great program, one that, has helped you in many ways. Having said that, we do hire financial consultants for a reason, and those financial consultants give us advice, and if we're going to hire them and ask for advice and they give us advice, that's the catch-22, taking the advice that they give typically. Having said that, we are looking to have a meeting with them next week to see what we can do. That's probably a good conversation for FFC in its granular form.
Okay.
Anybody else? We're ready to move on.
I submitted my question via the Board of Ed.
Okay, so where we are is construction drawings, G3. As you may recall, when we did have the agenda published, we did not yet have information necessary for me to complete the, what's called G3 item. We do have Katie, Ms. Murray here today. She's done an amazing job, Kate. She's I can't believe what she's accomplishing with this Birch Grove.
Full-time job.
I don't know how she does it, but she's doing it, and so she's here tonight to answer questions about it. So we have sufficient information now to put this G3 item out. Just for your edification, I can just cue it up for you, and you can take it from there. So the agenda serves as a first discussion about the pending approval of the Birch Grove primary school Phase 3 plans. You may note that on that's document thing, I put up all the Phase 3 stuff. So it's part of the plan and project manual prepared for bidding. It's dated the 20th, and the cost estimate will be released on or about February 3rd, not to exceed $46 million, which is the total project cost. Keep in mind that 89% of that is reimbursed by the state of Connecticut. So Phase 3 documents will be have been made available to you. You can peruse them between now and the time that you have to take action on it. But this motion to take action, and I could put a proposed motion in there, needs to be passed on or before February 12th. So, now that you're gonna add a meeting on the 6th, you could add a quick approval of it if you wanted to, which would give them, even more head time. But it has to be approved by the 12th. So basically what I tried to do here is make it as straightforward as possible from the standpoint of what that motion would look like. And then motion would be motion to approve the final Birch Grove Primary School Phase 3 plans and project manuals as prepared for bidding and dated January 20th, 2020, not to exceed $46 million of total project cost for the State Office of School Construction Grants and Review Project number 1480083. Motion authorizes the chair of the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools to sign the State Form SGC-042, request for review of final plans. So that's where we're at. Ms. Murray's here in case you have any questions. And I apologize if there's no questions. I dragged you out here for nothing. But she's here to answer them if you have them.
I mean, I know you're just starting off as well, so it's a lot of information just in terms of the Birch Grove. But I've heard rumblings that we're going to surpass that 46 million.
If you don't mind, let me walk you through some stuff, because
I need some guidance.
I brought one for you too. So I have some handouts, and I hope I should have enough for all of you, and so it can go in the minutes. This is the formal update that I'm gonna give town council next week, so thank you for giving me a dry run, chance to practice. So quickly just going through, we are on phase 3 of this project. Phase 1 was really exciting, taking down the awnings. Very exciting phase. Phase 2 is the rest of demo and abatement, and now we're talking about phase 3, which is building the school. This is where I get really excited. So Dr. Willett posted for you all approximately 2,800 pages of construction documents for this project. So go ahead, quiz me. I'm not ready. So I got this on Monday night too, just like everyone else, and I've started looking through them. I will get a formal page turn by the architect next week as they continue to work with local officials in town and the state on this project. The big picture here is we're building a school. It looks awesome from what we've seen. It will fulfill the educational requirements of our early primary education needs here in town. And not only that, but it's gonna look nice too, which is great. There are some changes in the new building that were not in the original building. Some of those changes are due to educational changes. There's gonna be, for example, a formal science room, which I don't believe is in the now non-existent building. That's reflective of the changes to the educational needs of our district that maybe weren't in effect in the early 90s when we built the original school. We also, per educational requests, are going to a single-story building. This allows for more flexibility in what I have learned are called bubble classes. When we have large classes that might be bigger than the class size around them, as you may or may not know, only second graders can receive instruction on the second floor. If you're not in second grade, you can't really go upstairs. So this allows for a lot more flexibility in terms of the educational program.
Can I have a quick thing? Just so you know, this update is on your dashboard too.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
So it's there.
Yep. So design done, we're going through the review and approval stage right now. And I listed out here who's going to approve, but none of this is really a surprise. The building committee approves, you guys approve, superintendent of school approves, and we get some approvals from town staff who make sure we're up to code on various codes. And as Dr. Willett explained, the approval deadline is February 12th. On February 13th at 9 a.m., the architect meets with the OCS, I lose the acronym every time. Anyway, with the state to do their formal review and anticipated approval of the construction documents. In order for us to be eligible for the 89% reimbursement, all the signatures need to be on the form saying it's all been approved town side. If we don't want 89% reimbursement, no problem, we just don't sign the form. But everybody wants 89% reimbursement, so what I wanna do is get you guys to a point where you're comfortable with the plans, so you're comfortable making the affirmative vote and requisite signatures. let's talk about budget, because this is a question I get a lot, right? So the overall project budget is $46 million. It is not $46 million and $1, it is $46 million. We've made it incredibly clear, I don't know how we could have made it clearer, that this project is not running over $46 million. Right now, or starting actually Monday afternoon, our contractor got the construction documents just like everyone else, and now has the information they need to give us an accurate construction estimate. Up until this point, they haven't had enough information. They knew they were building a school, they knew how many classrooms there were gonna be, they knew how many bathrooms there were gonna be. But they didn't know things like how many lights are in each classroom. They didn't know the specifics of the wall systems, the ceiling systems, the floor systems. Now they have all of that information in the 2,800 pages that were published so that they can give us an accurate set of pricing. We are going to get a construction estimate, and unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get it on February 3rd. We have been asking and we are being told it's not gonna be ready.
That's the honor of.
Right, yeah. Right now, I think it's going, they know they have to give it to us by February 11th, because that's when the building committee meets, on Tuesday night, February 11th. So my guess is I'm not going to see it before if I'm lucky, I might get to see it up that morning of February 11th, because I will stalk them. But otherwise, it's being worked on up until then. What I can tell you is the last page you have is this fun little colorful timeline. I like colors. And one of the timeline items is about checking in with the state on the project estimate. And they are checking in with the state, not every day, but I believe they checked in with the state once this week, next week it's twice, the following week it's 4 times. So they are being held to on a very tight leash by the state to get this construction estimate compiled and to us so that we can accurately review it. I have been told that it will be under $46 million. The gentleman who told me this is he's now the Undersecretary of Department of Administrative Services. I don't know, he sounds really important, but he has a lot of experience building schools, so I'm much more likely to believe what he says than his title. But he talks about, he's been looking at these drawings, he's been looking at drafts of these drawings, and he says this school will be built under $46 million. He's got a little bit of skin in this game, as I like to say, and in that, you know, he directed the town, he recommended to the town, the architect, the contractor, and the owner's rep, and they're doing a good job, but there's a lot of connectivity in this entire project, and that gives me a lot of confidence that this project is going to run under $46 million. I will tell you that I have spoken with every member of the building committee. We talked this weekend again, and this is a concern, right? We want this building to come in under $46 million because we don't have any more, and everybody has the expectation that it will. So I'm not gonna tell you how the building committee is gonna vote, because I obviously don't know, but I don't see a situation where we vote to approve these construction documents if it's over $46 million. At that point, we need to move really fast to make some changes that we don't wanna make. So the best I can tell you is this is gonna happen. And it's not only is it gonna happen, but we're gonna get a really good quality school out of it. So, I don't know if that answers your question about budget, but it's really all the information I have.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because that's more than I have.
So there is a little bit more information, just so you guys understand. There's a lot of, again, connectivity with this project. The town is heavily involved. We have dealt with a wetlands permit. We've dealt with 824 favorable approval. They're really fun names for things here. We've been working very closely with public safety to make sure that this building is going to be even safer than the one that we had before. And the permitting process is complicated and we're running on a very tight time frame, but our building permit office is doing some collaboration with another town building official so that the building permit is accurately reviewed, but also fast-tracked. We're getting a lot of positive interaction with our fire marshal, our health compliance officer, and our 504 compliance, which is also Peter Stava. So there are a lot of people in town, outside of the Board of Ed and inside, that are working really hard to make this happen. And then the fun part of my update is the construction update, because I drive by Bridge Road, every day. It's fun to see it come down. So the old school doesn't exist anymore. For those of you who haven't driven by, it's down. They finished construction debris removal this week. They're starting to remove the concrete next week. We're not recycling any of that concrete. We've talked about this. We've asked this question over and over again. And no, we don't want this concrete, it's going. And we're scheduled to start site work and specifically retaining wall, which is sort of the big site work project, in the next couple of weeks. So the construction of this is moving, and we are on schedule to hand over the keys to the Board of Ed on August 23rd, 2021. So this is a really fast track project, but everything is still moving on time to get us there. Yeah, I know. It'll be great.
That's a lot.
I know, it's a lot, yes.
Now the question, any questions?
Yes.
I saw a couple of hands flying up, so you have the expert, ask away.
Yeah, please ask away.
So, thanks for staying for such a long meeting.
Yeah.
So, one question I just have about the quality of the school,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we don't know this yet, I'm not exactly sure, but I know like when they did the high school, there's been some problems with like the HVAC system. I don't know if like there's any sort of thoughts about to make sure that doesn't happen again with this new school.
Sure, these comments, this feedback is come up before. We don't want to repeat mistakes that have been made, that we've seen in the district or other people. We have a lot of really experienced people on the building committee in the construction trades, so they're bringing their experience, which is outside of the district, in as well. We are meeting Connecticut high energy compliance. To be honest, I'm not a construction expert, so I'm not 100% sure what it means. But they are telling me that the HVAC system that we are going to get is sufficient for the load of the, based on the size of the building. And that provides heat and air conditioning to the entire building. And Peter Stava, who's your facilities director, is a member of the building committee, and I see a lot of him. I didn't know him before this. We're good friends now, so he's definitely putting a lot of time into this too.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say in my short tenure of attendance, my one meeting.
No, it's 2 now, right?
It's 2, yeah, 1.5. I will say there's a lot of very passionate folks. They specifically were talking about things that you're talking about, and I will say when this committee was formed, the town and the interviewing process, they did a phenomenal job. Because there's a lot of very strong personalities that you need with differing opinions so they can get aligned. So yes, that was a lengthy conversation in my first meeting, to be honest, so.
Congratulations.
We have good people sitting there for it, fighting for our kids is all I'm saying.
I agree, and not a question, but just a comment. I just want to thank you, Katie, for all the work you're putting into this, because I do know that it's pretty much a full-time job.
This is my baby now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
building a nice school.
I really appreciate it for the future of Tolland and the kids that are going to be there for many, many years.
Yeah.
So thank you so
It's gonna
much.
be great.
Great
I'm
job.
excited.
Anybody else?
And thank you, Katie. I know you've been more than willing to answer questions and emails and
Yes,
haven't
please.
gotten to you yet.
Let's bring 'em.
That's my
All right.
apologies, but I do appreciate the opportunity. My question is on the approval.
Sure.
That's gonna be asked for specifically from this group.
Yep.
So are we being asked to approve only the drawing packages as Dr. Willett has posted, or any of the additional information that we've yet to receive?
So we're being asked, and by we I mean the Board of Ed as well as the building committee, we're being asked to approve what they're calling the Phase 3 construction documents, which are the approximately 2,800 pages of technical specifications and drawings that Dr. Willett posted to you. I will tell you that there's no playground in there yet, and I'm expecting the playground to be posted tomorrow. That's all part of the Phase 3 package. So what we are being asked to approve is all of Phase 3, which includes building, landscaping, playscape.
So right now, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, no.
But right now, in reference with the motion that you provided, we don't have the complete package that we're gonna be asked to approve.
No one has it.
Right.
Yeah, it
so
will
we
be, the
can't-
last piece of it is playground, which will be posted, I'm hoping, tomorrow.
So we can't approve this today.
No, I think of February 6th, we can add that into the, because you don't need it till the.
February 12th.
So if we do it the 6th meeting, we should be right on timeline for that, that way it gives us time to review the, thousands of pages. And I scrolled through it and it was.
Yeah, it's thorough.
It's very small, fine print.
Well, the construction documents are meant, when, the drawings, when I get them, they're like this big.
Just to get an idea.
And there's some good information. I've got, I've got some questions on the foundation right there.
Yeah, please, tell,
Well,
yeah, send it over.
I expect an overview from you.
I'll have, what do you call it, what is the Cliff Notes?
The Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
Cliff Notes, I like that.
So I
Just kidding,
got
that's not
one more kind of, I don't know, Paul, question about this motion. So, again, like I said, so to approve the final Phase 3 plans, not to exceed $46 million in total project cost, but we don't know the total cost yet.
Yeah, so, the total, yes, that's correct. We do not yet have a construction estimate specifically for the Phase 3 package, which is the largest portion of the total project construction. And we are going to get it to you, I will get it to Dr. Willett as soon as I get it. But I don't have it, so I can't, I'm not gonna make it up. But the one thing I can tell you is that it will be under 46 million total project costs. And that includes all the costs, including town side costs. It covers all the contracts that we have for this project, the bonding costs, the legal costs, et cetera.
So, so it's just, I thought you mentioned that it might be kind of like right up against the wire when we get that cost, so would we have time to review that? I'm just concerned.
So, I feel your pain. And this is what we as a building committee have been running up against, and are to be honest, it's very frustrating. We are running an emergency project on an incredibly accelerated timeline. For example, the portables, modulars portion of this project involved something like 63 days of construction, which had never been done, as far as anyone knows, in the state before. We're not running quite that tight, but to take a building down and have it come back up 2 years later is exceptional, that's a great word for it. So every group involved in this project is feeling the pressure of time.
So I'm just kind of curious though, what would happen, like say we approve this language as is and they don't have a cost estimate for us, and then it comes out and it says it's gonna be 48 million instead of 46 million. Like what would happen, because we approved it for 46
Well,
million,
then
so like.
it wouldn't be, I would think that your motion wouldn't be applicable.
It would be void, okay.
I mean, that would be my best guess.
Can you repeat that?
That the motion wouldn't be applicable.
Right.
Right, if the construction estimate, like the worst case scenario happens, and I will stress again, I do not expect that to happen. But if it did, I would think that your motion wouldn't be applicable to the documents that are being submitted.
And if we get to the point where we have to approve the document package without portions of it, I think it's important to phrase our motion correctly where it's articulated like that. I mean, we cannot approve what we don't have. We can approve what they've given us, and I'm hoping that the entities involved, well, I'm not taking away from the pace anybody's doing, not just our group, but up to the state and to the contractors, everybody's doing an amazing job. But they have to understand that there is a certain pace this has to go. We have to have the drawing to approve the drawing.
Sure.
And if they want the entire package approved,
You can't ban.
You have to have it.
absolutely.
Agreed.
We can approve what we have.
Agreed.
And I think we articulate the motion correctly at that point.
Can I just ask, who's the February 12th date?
So the February 12th date is the, you guys have a meeting scheduled on February 12th, and that was our anticipated second review of this, and the anticipated vote from the Board of Ed was coming February 12th.
So can we go back to doing it on February 12th? Because if we have to have the dollar amount by February 11th, does it make more sense to put it on the February 12th meeting when we actually should, or we should have all the information that we need to really make?
We'll be in a voting mood on the 12th.
There you go.
That'll be fine too. I just wanna make sure that we have everything that we need in order to just.
Rather than talking
hold up
about it on the
process.
6th, if we don't have the dollar amount, we might as well, should we just wait till
Just
the
wait until
12th
we
until
have
we
the
have
whole
everything?
kit and caboodle.
Whatever works for you guys.
Does it matter if it's 11 o'clock at night on the 12th?
My
or-
guess is that the representative from the architect's firm will be waiting for the signatures, because she needs to be in Hartford at 9 a.m. the next morning.
Okay.
So maybe you guys would consider putting it early on your agenda or something like that, for her sake, so.
I'm with her, not like.
I mean, if it is ready at 6, absolutely.
You don't sound too confident.
I'm not confident,
They're gonna get
I'm
you
not
the-
confident you're getting on the 6th.
Well, if it does, shoot him an email.
Yeah, oh yeah, as soon
Let
as
us
it's
know
ready, it's
so that
going
we can
ahead,
just get that done.
Yep, absolutely.
And in the meantime, everyone can read everything that's on.
If we do it on, you mean the 6th, the new meeting that we?
The new meeting, we'll add that
Well,
to
we
that.
didn't actually do the action yet, but.
No, we didn't.
But that's a special meeting.
You can add to
You can-
agenda items.
you can create it.
And then create it.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
it
what I
is.
mean, you have to,
Yeah.
it has to be on the agenda, you can't have it at the.
No, but we can do it.
Add it, put it on, and then if we
And then
don't
we
get
can
to
take
it,
it off.
we can table it.
Yeah, exactly. Those are my thoughts.
We table some of these items.
Well, I don't think,
Those other ones are quick.
yeah. Here, for the 1% fund, graduation date.
Are we good with
legislation
Katie?
purpose.
Katie, you're phenomenal, thank you.
Thank you guys very much, and I look
Thank you.
forward to, continuing working with you guys, so we get a great whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, education reserve fund.
It's been home.
Basically, when you get to this point in the year, it makes sense to request the council that we transfer money to the education reserve fund. So in accordance with ordinance 86, I gave you the language, basically chapter 8, section 8.2, and subject to the audit, which we have to wait for, and available in the balance, the status of the unassigned general fund. The town council shall accept a deposit from a non-lapsing account, any unexpended funds of the prior fiscal year from the budget appropriation for education. This amount may not exceed 1% of the total budget appropriation for such year. Keeping in mind that, if you look a little bit lower, the state of Connecticut, they have some, they have an ability to kind of look at it, and they have some leeway here from the standpoint that if the UCS revenue, is concerned that they decide not to make that transfer. So it is a request that you make, and it's about the time of year that we would do that. We have, I won't go into the verbiage because it is late, but if you look at it, it gives you all the information that would cover why and how. I can provide any additional information if you want. And the amount that we would be requesting in this motion would be $85,113, and it would be added to the educational reserve fund, which you're allowed to have each year 1% go into. So that's not 1% that you've got. It's got to be it's approved. So that's it. I'm going to try and keep it short. All the info is here. We'd have to wait for the audit, and they have the discretion of looking at it and saying, we're having a rough year, so no. And that's kind of where we're at. It can be used for special ed, for capital, and for tech.
So can I make a motion to add this to board action K2?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Okay, so the next agenda is the graduation date. Thank you to Public Act 19195. And props to Scott Nickel over there in Ellington. They were a big pusher of this to get the state to allow us to set our graduation dates earlier. This allows us to set it earlier in the year. We used to have to wait until April to do so. So we're gonna set the graduation date for June 18th of 2020. That should give families an opportunity to plan and do things that they need to do.
Get their banners ready.
What's that?
Get their banners ready.
Get the things going that they need to get going. So it'll help with support groups, school system firm up plans, we maybe be able to get some deals on rentals, that kind of thing. So it's made available to do so, and we're gonna do it. Typically, when you approve a board calendar, when you approve a calendar for the year, you're approving the general graduation date being within that span of time, based on snow days and all that. So you don't have to do any formal recognition, because you already approved the calendar.
Okay.
So this is just, this is more like giving people the information in a formal sense people were asking, and now it's out there. So this is a good thing, I think. And if there's no questions on that, legislative breakfast. So, working to provide a legislative breakfast, and we've, the last few years, many of you have participated in the legislative breakfast that have been in the area. You may recall that last year it was in Ellington. And the superintendents, we take turns hosting this, so each of us, obviously there's a lot of logistics to go into hosting it, and I offered to do it this year in cooperation with Kate. So we are offering the legislative breakfast. I've sent out a kind of information for the board on this, and it's going to be happening on January 30th from 8 to 9:30. We have a wonderful performance. It's a music and choral performance that combines our TIS kids with our high school kids, and it should be a really cute, really nice, awesome performance. Fisher Thompson is in command, and he's doing a great job. And we're gonna have, obviously, our food services provides food, and the legislators come. We have a representative from Joe Courtney's office coming, Dan Champagne is coming, Saud Anwar, Pat Wilson-Phineas, Tim Packard, so far Christopher Davis, Doug Dubitsky. Let's see, this is just where we are right now, and others are still saying, yes, Michael Winkler, Lori Steelman, because it's also out to other town managers / selectmen. So we have quite a few people coming to this, and even more coming in every day. So it should be a very interesting and good event, and the flyer is right there.
And make sure that if you're going, you send Jen an email.
Yeah, let Jen know so we have.
Because I didn't do that.
Well, I'm just curious, this is right during finals, isn't it? Does that mean anything?
Well, we're in the library.
Already asked them.
Yeah, we're in the library, and the kids, the young adults that are participating, TIS kids are not involved with that, and I made sure Fisher was okay with it. Yeah. And they don't want anything to do with balding people like myself in a library. They'll be okay with us doing our thing, and no one.
I know they hang out like somewhere in between. Are they in the cafeteria?
My guess is they'll be staying away. There'll be a lot of things that look to them like maybe
Important adults.
people like me, which maybe they're not nice, but they don't want to spend the whole morning with me. So there's that. And I think we've gotten through all of the.
All of yours, yes. Committee and liaison reports. UFFC.
We table that to the next meeting?
I'll give 2 the next time.
That's fine.
It's up to you.
And Tony, you have policy right before? Okay. Chair report, I actually wrote something, so I'm gonna say it quickly. Okay. I wasn't going to give a chair report for the sake of saving time, however, after spending long weekends and nights reviewing the budget, it is clear to me that there's so much more work to be done. There's been a lot of rumors and public statements that the current Board of Ed is out to make severe cuts. This is unfounded, as we've just started to review the budget. Through a process of asking questions, only then can an understanding of what the budget needs to be achieved. Information such as enrollment sheets, salary schedules that tie grand totals, insurance costs involving like Octon's report, because insurance details are above my pay grade, The board has not added nor cut anything. We are basing these types of decisions as the superintendent sees fit. Responsible budgeting comes with asking questions and verifying the data. I want to see the most responsible budget move forward that fulfills our district's needs. Conscious of where funds are and will be going. We need to work together in areas to find where the trend might not be high. I'm also a parent with kids in our school system, as other members are too. I'm invested into keeping our schools strong. Our children are our future. Our goal is to ensure that our district can remain competitive. Short and sweet. Board action. We have 2 agenda items. I will entertain a motion to add the February 6th meeting as a special meeting to discuss budget and to put the Birch Grove.
Second.
And
Karen.
Yes. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Motion passes. There's no abstentions. Everyone's unanimous. And then
And just to be clear, where we're at right now on that is it's gonna be budget and Birch Grove. Because we wouldn't be meeting about it ahead of time in this case, unless you wanted to, so if you wanna make those 2 items.
2-6, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, two items.
Yeah, just Birch Grove and budget.
Budget.
That'll be the only 2 things on that,
That's it.
Yeah.
right?
I'd like to do the Birch Grove first, so if she can
Yep,
sit down.
absolutely, so that'll, just to confirm so we're all on the same page, those are the 2 things and that's it.
Okay.
Birch Grove budget.
So that's all set. What do we have for K2?
Motion to the town board of education pursuant to ordinance 86, chapter 8, hereby makes the request that the town council transfer the BOE audited balance of June 30th, 2019 in the amount of $85,113 into the educational reserve fund.
Second.
Any discussion?
Ms. Rainey.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're good to go. Motion passes. Okay, public participation, 2-minute limit.
We have public
Comments.
There is public stuff.
There is still
Comments from items on this agenda.
You did stay to the end, we gotta give it to you.
We're gonna get into it, always.
Like we told you with the
1 minute limit on you.
Google 1160 Town Stage Road, and I'd like to just echo what Katie said. I'm a member of the Birch Grove Building Committee as well. I promise you that we're working to make sure that it gets an excellent building on time and on budget. And, so I'd like to, we're working the best that we can. And we'll get that information to you as soon as we get that as well. The other issue that I'd like to bring up is, Dr. Willett asked us before, if we were looking for cuts, what would we propose? What I'm asking this board to look at is the issue regarding professional development, line 325. That what you have here is a budget that went up for that from $150,000 over $350,000, an increase of 128%. An increase of $194,000. That if you're serious about keeping these keeping the paras, the special ed teachers, the other teachers that we need to, as Dr. Willett said, $52,000 keeps that one special ed teacher. I would ask you to take a serious look at that to see why that was such an increase, 128% in 1 year, $194,000 in 1 year, and if that is where cost savings can be found to save these teachers that we all want included as part of our educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Anyone else?
I gotta say something.
Yes,
Fishing Game Road. I think we need a little reality check, but I'm not hearing it. I was hoping this council will be better than the other, or the board, excuse me. I don't think you're facing reality. I don't think you're listening to what else is going on in town. You're too busy in your own little world. We have 186 foundations. They're all getting chopped on their taxes. Only 17 have been returned. We're getting less money from the state. Dairy farmers are out of business, top 10 taxpayer. Now, I would assume, starting the new budget, we're gonna be paying for 2 Birch Groves. One that we don't have and the other one we don't have. Well, we're gonna be paying for both of them. I don't know how long, but I think it's 5 years.
I think we're gonna have a significant tax increase to get to zero because of all these things. We're looking at probably a few $1 billion or more just in these foundations. Just to come up with the money we need to get to zero. So I think anything to 187, I think is a pipe dream. You're looking at little cuts and you need to be looking at big cuts. And all due respect, there's about 75% of the people in town do not have anyone in school. I have kids, I have grandkids, I understand how it is, but I also am a taxpayer. And I think your 8.69 that the teachers got sucks because I've been out of work for over 5 years. And with Social Security, I didn't come up with half that yet. And my oil bill's the same, and my taxes are the same, and my food and everything else is the same as the teachers. So don't tell me what a great deal is unless you give me a raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're good. Points of information. Or we, are you just doing?
Just real quick, it's the programs in there, which I'll post probably definitely one of the questions is that, I mean, these are programs that prevent you from having, the issues that you'll have without them, like the outplacements, things like that. If you take the tires off the car, the people in the car aren't going anywhere. There's the tires in the car. So, it's just the kind of thing you have to think about. We're making those actions to prevent you from having problems. I think that's about it. I understand.
24% of the population in Tolland is under the age of 18. 24%. The budget has gone up $4.6 million since 2013. It's a 13.3% increase. And we have, since 2017, at least 200 less kids. I don't know prior to that, but we do have to keep those numbers in mind. It's a lot of money, and another $600,000 in loss of revenue. It's like 5.2 million. It's a lot of money.
What went up 4.6?
The budget, it started out at 36 million and we're up to 41 million, close to it, I mean, round numbers, since, based on what's in our budget book, so I think it's.
Yeah, well, I just wanna make sure that I reiterate, in 2017, 2018, we're at 0%, 2018, 2019, 0.78, 2019, 2020, 0.84. Those have been pretty moderate and conservative budgets over the last several years, so, which doesn't even keep up with inflation or contractual obligations, so we need to be acutely aware of that.
We do, I'm just saying it's gone up close to $5 million and we lost $600,000 worth of revenue on top of it, just to support the side of the taxpayer. I'm not saying anything other than that. Sometimes the percentages, the numbers, the amount of money gets lost in the sauce on a percentage.
Right.
Because 0.74 of $40 million is still a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's all I'm saying, I'm not just giving that other side.
Kate pointed out tonight that under 10.222, you have the obligation of making sure that, that the educational service provided, obviously you want to do it responsibly. I put out 1.87 because I feel that it's responsible and ultimately it'll be your decision. The town council has the burden of deciding what you can afford. You have the burden of putting forward what the ed system needs for the students.
I think it's important to remember that we're not done. We've got a proposed budget, we've got a series of questions, we've asked for additional meetings. We have absolutely every intent of looking through these line items, making sure that the budget that's presented fulfills the needs for our kids, but it's the best we can do. We're not finished.
I will also add that the unassigned fund balance in this town has gone up steadily, and we can keep putting away money in there, so.
On the town side of it.
Yeah. Fair comment, just as Rainey talked about our budget, so.
Right.
Your town and your board have been responsible, and you have unassigned and assigned fund balances that have gone up over a series of years, and they've done some responsible, putting some money away, just like as a Board of Education, you have an education reserve fund that you're putting money into. You have a great town, you're doing a lot of responsible things, you're doing great stuff. You can look at all of your data about where the state puts you in terms of your affordability and your school systems, you're doing it's a lot of great stuff. So you can afford the 187, I think, from the standpoint of making sure that you're maintaining the service you have, so you can keep doing good stuff.
What I think we need to also be acutely aware is, as a Board of Education, like you said, and like Kate was saying, it's providing a strong educational system, not ignoring the other needs of folks in town, but our focus is being responsible and making sure that we have everything that we need, for the students. And I will say, what's concerning me, and I would hope that people continue to send in emails and continue to submit questions, because I get very concerned about alternate forms of communication that people are putting out there that are getting a lot of misconstrued information that was almost reminiscent of what you said on your statement. You know, we're working hard, we're working at pulling it apart. I mean, we've all looked at it for hours and hours and hours. Christine was joking about it the other day, about 40 hours of work the other day. I'm doing it till my eyes don't see anymore. So I wanna make sure that, it's on record that we are doing our due diligence. We are really, no matter what side of the table or what side of the horseshoe, we're all really doing our due diligence, and we're passionate about our students, we're passionate about our town. I mean, I don't wanna speak for anybody, but I feel strongly that we're passionate about our students and we're passionate about our town, and we really wanna do the right thing without minimizing everybody else's other priorities.
But let's be a little careful, and, I don't wanna pick on words, but with the narrative we're putting out there, we are giving it the due diligence. We are putting
Correct.
forward the best one that we can, but not necessarily the one that we think the town can afford. I think we gotta.
No, I didn't say that.
So we gotta take that
It's my
out.
job to remind you, basically, 10 to 22, your job is to come up with what the kids need, and the town council's job is to decide what you can pay for. Your obligation is to provide, to the community what you feel in your heart and through your principles and through your ethics, what's needed here to execute what's important for the kids. And that was, mirrored by Kate, so that's your burden. And then the town council's burden is to decide what you can afford.
Bunch of stuff was said here. Let me just try to make this brief because it's late, but anyway, and thank you, George, for what you had to say. I'd just like to say that I understand that some people in Tolland can't afford it, but a lot of people can't, particularly people who don't have kids, or retired living on a fixed income. You need those people paying taxes in order for your school system to be relatively affordable. If you price those people out, it's just going to be more expensive, especially for people who have kids who came to this school system, but if you don't make a lot of money. I don't think if we become so unaffordable to live here and you price those people out and they have to go to a poor quality school district, I don't think we're really serving people. I don't think we're serving kids in this district. It's just something I'd like to bring up because I get that, we are supposed to do the best we can for the school district, and I'm gonna look through this budget, I'm looking through it now, and if I end up coming out of this thinking that 1.87 is the best we can possibly do, I'll support it. But I disagree with the idea that, we can't try to look for efficiencies and try to dig deeper and care about the taxpayers as well. I think it's kind of a cavalier attitude not to look at it that way because we are such a large part of the budget.
And I would be clear, I don't hear
Thank you.
any of you say. That's not what I'm hearing from you, so.
That's not what was intended, and that's not what I said. So if that's what you're alluding to, I talked about everybody's different issues. But it is our responsibility as a Board of Education to focus on the Board of Education budget with all the different interests of town. So if that's what you're alluding to, Jacob, that's not.
No, it wasn't what you said. So.
Thank you, I just wanna make sure that's all.
You got a lot of questions to answer. Then we can go forward, okay.
Agenda by Monday or Friday?
Will you entertain a motion to adjourn?
When,
I will.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Opposed? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstentions? Are we good?
no, 22.
Yeah.